States.
为什么要离开中国？今天我要来美国。
To come to the United States.
为什么要离开中国？今天我要来美国。
这东西不好做。这家里面不好做。
Oh, it's hard to live there.
找工作很难找。
Hard to find jobs.
What did you do? Did you work in China? 以前是在厂里面上班，现在厂里面工作不好做。
But now it's hard to work in the factory.
Was this a trip expensive?
这次来会花很多钱啊。
She said it was, and that she sold her house to cover the $14,000 cost of her trip to the U.S. Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported 37,000 Chinese citizens were apprehended crossing illegally from Mexico into the U.S. That's 50 times more than 2 years earlier. Many of the migrants told us they made the journey to escape China's increasingly repressive political climate and sluggish economy. This 37-year-old woman said China's COVID lockdown destroyed her childcare business. She left her 2 young children with family at home. And why did you decide to come to the United States?
要决定要来美国。
因为很多原因吧。
Many reasons.
For work or?
是为了工作呢，还是为了什么？
不完全是为了工作。
Not entirely.
Okay, what reasons?
是其他原因呢？
想说啥就说什么。
可以。
自由。
Freedom.
How much property do you have here? The land they're waiting on is owned by 75-year-old Jerry Schuster, a retiree. The whole world seems to know there's a way in and it's on your property.
They're all doing this. When they come over here, they come with the suitcases. They come prepared with the computers, just like they got off on a Norwegian cruise ship yesterday.
Schuster owns 17 acres just north of the border fence and a quarter-mile outside of Yacumba Hot Springs, California. Population 540. You're an immigrant yourself.
Yes.
Where did you come from?
I come from Yugoslavia, and I left Yugoslavia. I went to Austria. I stayed there 8 months, and I knocked on this door. I didn't bust the door down to come over here.
You came through the front door?
I came through the front door.
And what do you think about this?
They don't care. They come through their whole, like, they come into their own country over here, and nobody do nothing about it.
Schuster says it all started in May. He went to investigate some smoke coming from his property and found migrants burning trees to stay warm. Today, his property looks like a messy moonscape, littered with the trash and tents migrants have left behind. Have you ever just yelled, "Get out of here"?
Well, they say that was like 4 months ago. There was 8 guys started knocking my trees and start burning my trees on the other side. So I told them, please don't do that. Please don't. They start surrounding me. I went home and I got my gun and I shoot in the air. They arrested me.
They arrested you?
Yeah, they arrested me.
On your property?
Yeah, on my property. Yeah, just because I asked them not to burn the trees, not to knock the fences, and they arrested me. They put me in a police car and just protected my own land.
Yeah. Schuster wasn't charged, but his gun was confiscated. If you had to guess, how many migrants do you think you've seen come through here?
Maybe 3,000 a week.
3,000 a week?
I would say that, yes. Because this is an ongoing deal.
Right now, working nonstop. I want to bring in Dr. Bradley Thayer because I think this will contextualize what's happening in the southern border, and particularly the fact that the Chinese Communist Party, they may say, "Oh, Trump could be better," and the mainstream media saying, "Oh, they want Trump." As Nicole just said, the last thing they want is Trump, the person who's prepared to not have engagement with him and to play hardball with the Chinese Communist Party. Dr. Thayer, you got a magnificent piece that's out. People forget that she gets a vote in this election.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, it's great to join you again. Thanks for having me on. He does indeed get a vote in the election. Look, this year is a critical one for Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. They're an illegitimate government because they're communists. They know that they're illegitimate. Their economy is in free fall. The CSI 1000 index is down 7%. Right, it's the, I believe, seventh day that it's in decline. It's basically their stock market is just falling apart. One of many problems that they have in their economy, and that gives the necessity for Xi Jinping to sustain and to continue his lifeline. His lifeline is with Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama, because it is with those engagers, those Biden, Newsom, Obama, will sustain trade and investment in the CCP, and that's going to sustain Xi Jinping. Trump is going to cut that off. So Trump is going to go after Xi Jinping hard to put him on the ash heap of history, just as Ronald Reagan did to the Soviet Communist Party. So Xi knows that Trump is an existential threat to him, and that's why Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party are going to use every tool at their disposal to ensure that Trump does not become president on November 5th of this year. And so we should expect massive election interference in the U.S. presidential election to ensure that Biden or Newsom or Obama become president.
I haven't put it up yet, but Scott Bessent, remember the hedge fund guy, the former Soros guy who's MAGA, who now did this amazing piece talking about the Trump rally in this U.S. stock market. They did the analysis. When Trump's leading, market goes up higher. When Biden's leading, either market doesn't increase as much or actually goes down. The Financial Times of London on Saturday actually did a piece from one of their lead columnists that said they talk about the Trump effect as it hits China, that they think a bunch of this free fall is investors saying, hey, Trump was hard. The first time Trump's talking about 60% tariffs. He's talking about these huge tariffs. Now's the time to get my money out, but it's certainly not time to put any money in. Give me your assessment of that Trump effect in China right now.
I think that's entirely accurate, that there's a reason why the Chinese stock market is just in collapse. And that's, I think, precisely because of that. There's the expectation from foreign investors that Trump stands a very good chance of being elected on November 5th. And so China does not look good because Trump is going to hold the CCP to account. He's going to do his utmost to evict them from power. Again, this is existential, right? This is a titanic struggle between Trump and Xi Jinping, and it's not framed in that way, but in fact it is. And Xi is putting his thumb on the scale to get Biden over the finish line, or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama. So he's going to employ that's TikTok. There's a reason why these guys are coming over the border. It's sabotage. It's also going to be election interference, which is going to take a cyber form. It's going to take deep fake artificial intelligence form. It's going to take ballot harvesting and stuffing, right? Essentially, in some respects, the more yeoman tasks of stealing an election. And you're going to expect, of course, that Xi Jinping is going to follow that Chicago mantra: vote early and vote often, to ensure that the Democratic candidate gets elected, right?
So we have to return to the discussion here of this phenomenon of the outbreak of real political tyranny here in the United States. And you can see the bad actors in the background and this Neo-Bolshevik uprising within the credential class from the halls of academia. the Marxist cadre, has really grown and metastasized to such an extent where you can see that they have control over the levers of power, and little by little, the gatekeepers and the nodes, the key choke points where decision-making power is really being accrued into the hands of the fewest and the most hyper-political and hostile partisan provocateurs, right? I mean, all the way into the Pentagon, where they're so self-assured in the rightness and the moral value and quality of their DEI and uniquely white racists in their DNA, right? Where other people who have other characteristics and ethnicities from other places in the world who have melanin content in their skin, those individuals cannot possibly be racist according to these new Marxist university Ivy League definitions of what is right and wrong and what definitions and what words mean. Only whitey, right, can be racist. And I mean, we're not just making this up, and we're not like playing the victim role. And you don't see people in America who are from all walks of life, who might be from all over northern parts of the world, right? Parts of the world that are farther away from the equator. Places like Poland and Germany, right? People in America are really just the scions and the wild offshoot branch families that came from all over Europe and Scandinavia and Russia. And so it's really quite racist to even denominate people, as we said over and over again, into this terminology and this useless propaganda idioms like whites, because people are from Scotland, people are from all over the world, people who come from the northern climes, right? Their family lines have spread all over the face of the earth. And the truth is that it's really these people who have a light complexion, who are Swedes, who might be from Belarus, right? They might even be from Italy. You really can't tell until you hear them talk. These people are so diverse and they look so different and unique and they're from all over the place. But the truth is we have different levels of melanin in our skin. Some of us are more tanned and some of us are light complexion. And so this is how this kind of myopic, deranged, unsophisticated and blunt force trauma, which these globalists are using against the populace to kind of put us in this position. And they keep reinforcing the stereotypes, the anti-stereotypes over and over again in their movies and their propaganda, and everything you watch now on Netflix has to be the traditional roles of every single individual have to be traditionally reversed. Every man who could be from sub-Saharan Africa, right, who might have melanin in his skin, he might be an African man, but he might not be. Maybe he's from really South America, or even from Australia, right? The Aborigines in Australia, very many of them could have dark, skin color and dark melanin content in their skin. They could be, thought to be from Africa, but, they're not. They're so this kind of looking through the world through the straw, right? Total ignorance that pervades Hollywood and pervades, the pop culture and hip hop thinking. It really did, and just black and white, like Black History Month. So we're pretty deep into it now. It's pretty hard for people to back out of it and really understand what's being foisted on them and what they're losing in this trade-off to enter into these kind of cathartic, pre-engineered racial conflicts along racial lines, like roughly, right? Because we're all so different, we're all from different places, and we all could be said to be different ways, but because of the way that this 1940s, 1950s, 1960s racialist dialectic, right, that these Freemasons and these papal knights and these ultramontane lords and sovereigns from afar, right? They've foisted us into the American populace into many things, many traps, many choking currency insolvency and debt servitude, right? Because we're now, I don't know how much, you have to go count up how many people you have in your household, how much money that you guys owe the IRS and the international banks, the banking establishment there in London, for instance. Apparently, we all owe them something around $200,000 each, even if you're just a newborn baby. I don't know about your family, but our family has newborn babies, and that newborn baby has got to be signed up for that $200,000. We all owe it, because the truth of the matter is that it's the full faith and credit of the United States of America that backs that currency, right? That Federal Reserve note. Can't really call it a dollar. That's not really exactly accurate. It's a note. It's a debt note. It's a Federal Reserve debt note, okay? It came into being in 1913. They crashed it in 1929, and we've been going down the tubes ever since. So there are many things that we've been saddled with that have been foisted on us, other than just the psychological operations of now becoming cloned out and psychologically tuned to be blacks or whites. Okay, so I'm not going to accept it. I'm from Ireland originally. I think there's a little bit of German, right? So I'm like a German-Irish guy. And so we still have, roughly German-Irish kids still, you see how that works. Pretty amazing. So I like that appellation more, and I don't appreciate white. I don't appreciate being called that. It's quite slanderous. It's like to me now it's like the N-word. And I know people are still going to use it constantly, and it's the dialectic by which we're all being wedged and pigeonholed into this kind of outbreak of mania and psychological distortion, right? And this process of the psyops that we're being descended into here in America. And so, you have to continue on with the importance of all the diversity and equity and inclusion mantras.
He's scared of the Fulton County constituency, and he does not want to seem like he's interrupting a powerful black woman, or he's going to let her go. And then he secretly thinks it's so outrageous, he's going to remove her from the case, and then he's going to say, well, I indulged her, so don't get mad at me. I don't know what it is, but I think it's option one. He was afraid. I do too, and he made a fool of himself. The judge did. Yeah. And then the commentary, Jack, Jeffrey Toobin, whom I don't understand why this person is back on CNN. He was caught masturbating on Zoom, and I mean that should have destroyed any shred of integrity that he had left. He was on there and he said flat out, I don't care if she lied. So what? It has nothing to do with Donald Trump's guilt or innocence. Yes, it does. No other prosecutor would ever have brought that case. She brought it, and she said and alleged certain things. But if we find out she has no credibility and she's a serial liar and she has committed fraud, then why would we trust anything she says? And can he get that as a lawyer? This hatred of Trump is so elemental, so existential that with this James case and the Carroll settlement, we've got 2 down, and Fannie Willis is coming up. And then we've got this crazy Alvin Bragg with the campaign Stormy Daniels thing. And then we've got Jack Smith. And, every legal scholar that has any reputation says that Jack Smith wasn't going after Donald Trump. He would have never filed writ after writ after writ to speed up the trial before the election. And that's what he's doing. And so this is all coordinated to drain him of money, to just damage his reputation before the election, to take his time, to destroy him physically, psychologically, financially, about everything. And it is true. Can't believe it's happening in the United States.
Victor, this one last thing on Willis. She, I think Nathan Wade, her legal lover, comes off as a kept man, and so for her to use the "I'm not going to emasculate a black man" when she has emasculated him by essentially being a female gigolo to him, I think is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah,
also, one other thing is the philosophy of the Biden administration and liberalism now is that, remember, this threshold of we're going to go after anybody who spends more than, we want to track all your spending more than $600. So Fannie Willis should be very much into, given her ideology.
They won't do a thing to her for all of that cash, if that's true. It'd be very easy just to subpoena her bank records and see how many times during this trip or right before it she made massive withdrawals on ATMs so that she would have the cash to give him. And I don't think she's going to allow those bank records to be looked at, because I don't think she gave him a dime. And that was the whole point. She hired him when he was unqualified. He was grateful, so he took her on an expensive series of junkets. And then they got up in front of everybody and they lied, and they played the race card ad nauseum. He played the race card. She played the race card. Her father played the ex-Black Panther. He played the race card in the same fashion that Lakita James has played the race card, the same fashion that Claudine Gay has played the race card. It's just, if Donald Trump had said, well, I want to make a statement, this is a white thing. You got to understand that I did this because it's a white thing, and people who are not familiar with the white community don't understand how we do things. People would have laughed him or said he was a racist. And it's got to stop because it's warping every aspect of our society. This, I need a special exemption, and I need to get immunity from this particular criticism or application of a law or a protocol because of my race. Right. And then, the other thing is when I heard her speak and I saw her temperament, how did that woman ever get through law school or to get series of very prestigious appointed jobs to put her in a position even to run for the district attorney? I could not believe it. I mean, if that is the representation of Fulton County, and she sits there and looks and interrupts and gets sassy and starts to talk about race and won't answer questions and then attacks the questioner and all of this. I mean, you can say Donald Trump is crude and disruptive, but he's not the district attorney with the responsibility to represent the state or the county. She is. And it's just mind-boggling what's going on in this country with these lawsuits, get him off the ballot, do all of this. And then at the same time they're doing this, they're sending out the narrative, oh my God, he might get elected. So let's pass a law that protects federal employees in the administrative state from being laid off at high position. My God, we're going to do this to him. We're going to do this. And we can talk for a second, Jack, about this missing binder. Sammy and I just brought it up briefly, but today there's more information that Michael Schellenberg's not a nut, and they believe that the powers that be were terrified that Donald Trump deliberately took that out and had it in his possession to use at an opportune date. And it showed that John Brennan allegedly had people contact foreign entities to have a surveillance of which we knew took place of Trump people. We know they did that to Papadopoulos, set him up in a bar. We know they did that to Carter Page. We know that there were people abroad in the CIA were paid large sums of money to surveil the Trump people. And when you have that type of roguery, and this is added on to using the FBI in the last election to work with Twitter to censor the laptop story or to recruit former CIA people to swear something that was impossible, that Moscow cooked up this laptop. It really begs the question, is this agency even viable? Is the FBI viable? When you're talking about making false statements, think about it for a minute. Andrew McCabe lied 4 times under oath, admittedly, to federal investigators. They didn't do anything to him. A FBI attorney doctored a court document that was submitted in the Carter Page and lied. They just put him on suspension. He's practicing law again. He wasn't even banned for 3 years like the Trump kids. So something is really scary about this country. And I guess the message is, it's kind of like the Soviet message. Join the party or you're going to be on the outside and you're not going to like it. If you're a business person in New York, I guess my advice to you would be, you better get out of that state as soon as possible, or you better stop any donation to any Republican candidate, and you better start sending big campaign donations to Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, Governor Hochul, Eric Adams, or you won't be able to do business in that state, in that city. But if you do, I think you'll be protected.
Right. Well, Victor, we're going to get your thoughts, more thoughts on Trump, about his comments about NATO, and a piece you've written for X, Twitter, about the 2 ways Donald Trump could lose, in November, and we'll get to that. Back with Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, let's lump these 2 Trumpy topics into one. So, Donald Trump made some very, very rough, tough, and much covered comments about NATO and NATO nations that are not fulfilling their 2% defense obligation and what Putin and Russia can do about that. And then you also wrote for Twitter X about your thoughts on 2 ways that Donald Trump could lose in November. Victor, share your thoughts with us, please.
Well, remember Donald Trump last week said 2 things that disrupted the catastrophic Biden 24-hour news cycle, in which the special counsel had basically said that Joe Biden had criminal liability and exposure because he willfully removed classified documents over several decades as a senator, as a vice president, and as a private citizen before he became president. And that he knew he had done that because there was a tape in 2017 that he remarked to his ghostwriter that he had in his possession classified documents, which he did not, contrary to what he alleged, notify federal authorities. And that ghostwriter, in fear, 5 years later, i.e. in the present when Jack Smith was appointed, erased that audio. And the only reason that we know it was through forensics. So the point I'm making is that was a bad news cycle. And then about a week ago, the Joe Biden press conference to show that he was mentally alert and dynamic. I remember the people like Corinne Jean-Pierre, Jack, and Kamala Harris said he's the most dynamic guy in the room. He just impresses everybody with his encyclopedic knowledge, his instant recall. They're just blown out when he comes in. And so to prove that was true and that the special prosecutor was false, Joe Biden gave a press conference. He lost his temper, and then he lied. He said the files were not classified. They were. He said they were stored in a safe and secure. Anybody look at the photograph, that garage is messier than, it's like a dump. It's like hoarder's garage. And then he lied and said he came forward to authorities. So it was, and then he mixed up the president of Mexico, the president. So it was a disaster. So we were going into the weekend and this week, Jack, with real questions that Joe Biden was not fit to be president because the left was in a dilemma. That the special prosecutor said, okay, yeah, he's guilty, but he's also demented. So it's one or the other. And I decided I could never convince a jury he's guilty because they would obviously see he's demented. And then the left said, oh, how dare you? He's not demented. And then they stopped and paused and thought, okay, he's not demented. Maybe he's guilty. Or then they said, no, I can't say that. Okay, he's innocent, but he's demented. And they couldn't figure out that. And they just, that lose-lose choice. So, and then Donald Trump started saying things. And the first thing he said that Nikki Haley's husband, as we said, where is she? And the implication was that they are separated and that he's not deployed, apparently, because of rumors of long ago adulterous trysts. Big deal. But that made him look small. And then secondly, he said that in the context of NATO not paying their fair share and how successful Donald Trump, had been in getting them to, when a NATO member said, would you defend us from Russia if we have not met our commitments? And he said, no. In fact, I don't give a hell whether Russia attacks you. And I guess that was the threats that he used that was successful. That part, of course, didn't come across, that he got more NATO countries to beef up their contributions to meet the 2% of GDP requirement. But that was lost in translation. So my point was simply, Jack, that the only thing that can stop Donald Trump is Letitia James. And I think that is going to be reversed on appeal. They've never used that law before. There was no victim. People are outraged. Or Fannie Willis, and I do think that she's either going to lose the case or they're going to give it to someone else who won't want anything to do with it in another county. Alvin Bragg is, I don't know what to say about that. Campaign finance, they find Barack Obama in 2009 for hiding the names of his donors, $375,000, but they kept it quiet and didn't really announce it for 5 years, so it wouldn't hurt him. They fined Hillary 119 for using campaign monies to pay off Christopher Steele and fusing GPS to those paywalls. They kept that. They didn't do that for a couple of years. So it's not going to hurt him. And then there's Jack Smith. Jack Smith's problem is Jack Smith right now is essentially trying Donald Trump for the same crime that his counterpart, twin special counsel Robert Hur, tried Joe Biden and found, unlike Jack Smith, because he hasn't found that yet, that Joe Biden willfully broke the law in a felonious fashion and removed classified files out of unsecured locations without the ability to declassify them, given his office was not president, and he did so over 3 decades. And yet he's not going to be prosecuted because he's demented. So I would tell Donald Trump if Jack Smith tries to press those charges against him, he should just say that he's demented because he mixed up Haley and Pelosi's name, and no jury would convict him. Something like that. That's where we are in America now. So I think he can survive that. I don't know if he'll come out with any money. I don't know if he'll come out with any time, but he'll be viable in a sense in the general election. But if he keeps batting away these softballs that are sent to him, he should just accept them. My God, these are gifts, right, about what's happening with Joe Biden. And they are panicking. Now they're going after an FBI. When's the last time the FBI went after an FBI crooked informant? Did you see that? They say, I mean, who was the crookedest informant they've ever had? It was Christopher Steele. That guy made up everything. Right. And what did the FBI do? Nothing. So they are panicking because they see that the proverbial walls are closing in on Joe Biden. But all Trump has to do, there's no margin of error. They don't have the money of the left. They don't have the media of the left. They don't have the institutional clout of the left. They don't have the mastery of non-election day voting the left does. It's going to be the nastiest, meanest, most contentious election in our history and the most expensive. And Donald Trump is walking along an abyss with everybody trying to push him in, and he can't jump in. And I know that's a lot to ask because I don't think any of us could take the abuse that he's suffered. But he has to because, as I said, the 2024 election is not 2020. We've gone down the hard road of socialism to such a degree in the last 4 years that we're not going to have much more opportunity to stop it. I mean,
the world's on fire.
Well, if did anybody think 4 years ago that we would institutionalize the idea that men participate in women's sports, and if you object, you can be fired? Did we institutionalize the idea the SAT score would be thrown out? Did we institutionalize the idea that prosecutors at the local and state level would go after a presidential candidate or try to get him off the ballot? Did we ever think there would be no border? Not a porous border, no border. 8 million people. Did we ever think that Hamas would go across and one day kill, rape, mutilate, dismember 12,000 Jewish civilians? Did we ever think that Vladimir Putin, who had been kept in a cage, would just go into Ukraine and try to take Kiev? No. And did we ever think we'd just say, yeah, we've done that, we're gone, bye Afghanistan, $50 billion, take it, we don't need it. We've seen things that we've never imagined. And if we had 4 more years of this, and we get up to $40 trillion in borrowed money, I don't know what we're going to do.
So there you have it, guys. We're bringing you the receipts. We're getting the different parts of this story that's coming out, the different advantages. We're going to have Papadopoulos on here speaking. We're going to have the different advantages that we can bring to bear. This is all what's crucial. I mean, these are different individuals out there and thinkers and academics and political figures and financiers that we have on the show who we're listening to. And we have to patchwork what they're finding out on the inside and come and patchwork together what we can learn here on the outside. We're just the outside audience, guys. I mean, let's face it. We're just the manipulated and deceived masses. We're the sheeple. And we don't have a great advantage when it comes to finding out the truth about this information. I remember Sean Hannity banging on and on and on over this FISA corruption and these Papadopoulos setup, and this move from this chicanery and this espionage and these geopolitical machinations unfolding in London and then in Rome with Mifsud, Joseph Mifsud, that Jesuit, right? But we're not. Who's deceived? Who's still like enmeshed in the matrix here in the different layers and can't see the forest through the trees, right? These spy schools in London and these advanced CIA academies in Rome, right? All the swanky hotels and the underlying international control grid that penetrates through the sovereignty of the American people and the national security, and the whole outbreak of this in total farce that we're seeing it come together now. It's clear that these traitors, these little worms in the Obama administration, at the behest of this Marxist traitors in the gates, right? And after everything we found out about Obama's underhanded introduction of this new darkness into the White House, right? A new catastrophe that's underlying this whole criminal scheme that has been so abusive to the American people has gotten completely out of control. So now we have this cabal of Neo-Bolshevik actors that are inside the wire, right? They're inside the agencies. And so this whole process of finding Joe Biden's ridiculous classified documents in the cobwebs and dust of his ridiculous garage by his ridiculous Corvette, right? His ridiculous crackhead, pervert, pedophile family, and the whole thing is disgusting. The whole apparatus of profane and boorish and greedy, petulant little pigs up in Washington, D.C. It's just become so played out. It's just so old. And this whole scheme, you remember Solyndra? I knew right what was going on from that point on. Right when they had the whole, right, how did they get rich just collapsing this supposed solar technology company? They're all bullshit, right? Like all 56 of the guys who signed the paper against Trump saying that he was a Russia collusion, something conspirator or something. All those guys should be brought up in charges and investigated, and their clearances, their security clearances removed. Right? This is the frogs and the ugly warts and the toads and the little slimy lizards down in the swamp of the deep state. Right? They're there just to. Right, these guys are all in their 60s and 70s, right? They're going out the door of life. They're moving on down the line towards, whatever happens to them next after this life, right? But they're going to clutch on like psychopath, like leeches, sucking as hard as possible on the tit of the thing, of their paymasters at the military-industrial, pharmaceutical industrial complex, as we have it here, biosecurity, deep state, or whatever. Yeah, guys, we have to retain our humanity and fight to keep every semblance of innocence and humanity that we have left. I don't know about you, but dealing with these people is getting the stink of them all over me, right? I mean, just having to look at their ridiculous and filthy diatribes on libs of TikTok, for instance. I mean, these people, they're so unrecoverable, and they're so profane and disgusting. It brings the collective median IQ and moral metric down, right? Just en masse. The whole dealing with these people is so despicable and disgusting. Just to have to contemplate how they think and how they reason and how they act and how they are constantly moving the goalposts closer and closer and closer to the children, right? It's all about getting snuggled up to the little children, right? That's what these pedophiles, Obama, you're all a bunch of little pederast, sick fucks. And that's what the rest of us normal humans are starting to discover about you. And there's no amount of PR agency that you can fund, or there's no way to spin this. You guys are sick. You're debased and corrupted beyond repair, right? So that's what this is all about. This whole thing is all about. The whole yarn that's uncoiling in front of our face. It's unspooling. The truth is coming out. They can't hide it. And I'm sure they're going to continue to kill people, right? I'm sure weird accidents will happen. Old executive and directors of the Donald Trump campaign will get shot suddenly. Just in Washington, D.C. crime incident. No big deal, right? Just everyone's going to get Seth Riched one at a time, right? When their moment comes, right? The deep state's just going to unleash a crime wave or some wet work or whatever it takes, right? Just to take out the opposition, right? That's what we're witnessing here in America. You can see the the columns and the support structure of our Constitution and of our democratic republic, our popular representative democracy, right here in America, it's crumbling down around us as we just sit here and watch. How many more ex-YouTube CEOs are going to lose their children to fentanyl in a college dorm, right? Can you imagine that? Can you even picture it? Can you even grasp the horror and pain? You have your 19-year-old son, insulated, white privilege, right? He's expecting the whole world, right? You've worked hard. You've been a CEO of YouTube. You've made huge salaries. You're one of the elite, right? You're beyond reach, and you send your son off to Dartmouth or Princeton or whoever great school you send him to, and there in the college dorms he dies on overdose of fentanyl, right? That's what you guys don't understand. This is completely out of control. It's going to reach everyone everywhere. And if you're over there supporting abortion, that means you also support the destruction of Israel, and you're supporting the terrorism of Hamas and the rape of children and the kidnapping of people and destruction of whole families. You're supporting the cartels on the border, right? You might as well just go down and order a big brick of cocaine with like a scorpion stamp on it and just have it shipped to your house, because you are the problem. You are the business partner and the political attaché and the do-boy servant of this entire monstrous and diabolical structure of corruption, and Hezbollah down there joining up and hanging out with the dangerous and massive drug cartels that are basically turning Mexico into a narco state. Maybe they'll put a hit on you, right? Wasn't that what Carrie Lake was pointing out to us? How there's the courier who sends the messenger, who sends the little do-boy with the folded up paper in his pocket to deliver the message about, hey, why don't you come on over and just serve the money and serve the power. And we'll kiss up and make good with the cartels, and they won't have to kill you, right? So this is how we're going to arrive at a United Nations North American Union, right? They want a North American Union, guys. Isn't it obvious? Nobody can just say the thing of name the thing. Name what it is. They're trying to smash our border. Why? They're trying to crash our currency. Why? They're trying to invade America with all these new Confederate soldiers, right? The new army of the South, right? A mercenary army, right? These are the new Hessians. Except for they're not well-paid, well-educated Germans. These Hessians are just low-quality and impoverished rejects from their home countries, right? And of course, their home countries are wrecked because of the Goliath, as Brett Weinstein likes to call it. Good term. Totally encapsulates the entire, and it's a biblical reference to boo. I like that. And so it turns Brett Weinstein into a preacher of the gospel, the good news, right? Of course. But the good news is really the gospel, which is the truth. And of course, we're all behind that. We're all behind free speech because we're all behind the sometimes painful declaration and difficult utterances of the truth out loud so people can hear. So as we're going forward here, we have to take it seriously. We have to see how serious the difficulty we're facing here in America. Like watching Candace Owens, she's handsome to look at, but on all topics, and hey, I'm not even as educated as her or as well to do, right? She's doing really well for herself, but she seems to think that all this border issue is to cause a terrorist attack so that there'll be some kind of place that we'll have to send our soldiers overseas. Now, I don't think we'll have to send our soldiers overseas. I think it's painfully clear that the new war is going to be fought right here in America. You're seeing it fought all around you all the time. You're just trying to sit in your cabana by the beach and drink umbrella drinks with fruit cocktail, right? Just trying to kick back, to get some sun rays. And of course, all around you on the beach, there's foreigners from Eritrea who are here to rape, pillage, and plunder your countryside. They just hit the beach and just run over you and kick sand on you and on your sunscreen as they break into America and steal it, as they steal America. They're robbing America, and they're robbing it from us, and they're getting ready to try to put those sick and petulant and marauding invaders, have no idea where they are, how to treat people, or, right? They've just been driven here by World Economic Forum, United Nations policies. They've been driven here by the winds of the internationalist vendetta and the slow, incremental, and gradualism of the Congress of Vienna anathemas and curses, right, as we always said, that are being faithfully and very slowly executed. These exploits that have been planned for a century now, over a century. The revenge of the Counter-Reformation and the Jesuit order to destroy this Protestant republic, this upstart that tried to make men free of the papal idolatry, the temporal spiritual dominion of the Pope of Rome, as it cast that violent and bloody shadow of tyranny and despotism across all of Europe and all the world. And these nations, and I think our friend and advisor and teacher there, Eric Phelps would point out, Pastor Phelps, would probably point out that those nations who broke the back of the temporal and spiritual power of the Pope in Rome and broke away and created independent nations and visualized a land where men could be free and free from spiritual superstition and religio-cultic idolatry that destroys the hearts and minds and souls of men, right? Reduces all mankind to a bloody inquisition and the abyss and torture of the dungeons of all the different princes and monarchs of Europe. They all have their dungeons. They all have their place for you to go down and recant. Maybe have your feet burned off. Maybe have your feet burned down to the bone. You can still have some charred bone down there. But you're not going to walk anymore, right? But you're going to recant. You're going to repent. You're going to recant to whatever heresy your neighbors charged you with. Of course, if you read the history of the Inquisition, it gets so out of control that it just becomes a mechanism by which you just murder any adversary and steal their land. For the Pope and for the greatness of God, for the great glory of God, right, Jesuits? Isn't that why you always do your murders and your poisonings and your treachery and your destruction of nations? To serve God, right? So people don't understand how sick and maniacal and insanely fixated these novices and these assistancies that support this ancient and distilled religious violence, this ultramontane orthodoxy of absolute dominion and power, absolute rule. And so the foreign international, that's why these priests and these Jesuit chaplains up in the Capitol, they should have to sign up as representatives of a foreign power, right? Shouldn't they have to sign up as representatives of a foreign power? They represent the foreign power of the king and the sovereign monarch of the nation kingdom of Rome, of the Vatican city-state, right? Am I missing something? So this whole part where he comes out and kisses babies and waves at the adoring fans, I mean, they're not really faithful. These are idol worshipers. They replaced the truth of the living God with this man of sin and this reprobate antichrist, this Caesar, right? This new Caesar, this new Pharaoh who comes out and expects to be adorned and treated with gilded privilege, and that he should sit enthroned with the crown, the mitre crown of heaven upon his head, right? We're all just supposed to believe this rigmarole. We're supposed to partake in it. You put the mark of the beast ashes on your forehead and you go through the whole ritual because, I mean, if you don't, what will the consequences be for you civilly and socially? What will be the consequences to your clientele list, right? I mean, that's what we're learning here in all this work that we're doing here. We're discovering how central it is that the espionage and the covert of clandestine operations controls the Rome and controls London and controls Washington, D.C., is willing to pave over us all and turn us all into a landing strip in order to get what they want. And this age-old struggle that we've had with the right of the people to rule themselves, the right of them to keep and maintain firearms to protect themselves, for them to have their own right to have their own Bibles at home and to have the freedom of their own press and to inform themselves. This whole operation of building America was to free the people of not only America but of the world from this tyranny in Rome and in London. That was the whole plan. And so the whole thing is a process of instantiating a system and a declaration and a written constitutional framework by which we can remember and tell our children and maintain the political direction of our governing apparatus towards freedom and towards liberty and towards the empowerment of the people. And of course, they had to separate those branches of power. They had to do all these things in order to give the people a chance to have a republic and have a representative democracy that which they could be free and wealthy and prosperous citizens of free nations. Right? That's what it was. And this entire monstrous Leviathan and Goliath system that we resisted in 1776 is the same exact apparatus and system that we have to resist today. And it comes in the name of CIA puppet cutout boy Barry Davis Sotoro Obama and his boyfriend Michael, right? Let's just face it. I mean, back in the day, they used to have to do a check on the popes, had to do a little, check on the undies, just a little check, make sure we're not having the wrong plumbing down there. Maybe we just need to check. What's up, Michelle Obama? You don't have any pictures of being pregnant. No one knows where those kids came from, and it's a total conspiracy theory because you're supposedly a man. So are you a man, Michelle Obama? Are you a man? So let's stop flipping the world over and try to make us all use weird pronouns and stop trying to turn every kid in the classroom into a different gender, a little perversion. Let's stop trying to molest the little innocent minds of the kids in the classrooms by making them think about penises and vaginas all day, right? What if my vagina is supposed to be a penis, right? They're messing up the kids' minds. And this is all coming from the Obamas because they are perverted, sick fucks, and they have to make the world into their own image. It's like the Midas touch of shit. And we're supposed to all clap and like it and put on our mask and celebrate it. We're not doing any of that. And look at all these worms over there. Those little sad, little sycophant, little worshiping worms are down wriggling, slimy little worms wriggling around, trying to hold up the Biden sign as our country goes down in flames. Welcoming in the invaders. Oh, come and invade in my house. Come and stay and you can invade in my house. I have a room for you. You can invade in my fridge and take my food, right? So how long before a whole family, American family, is slaughtered by these individuals who will find still living in the house of the individuals they've murdered, right? I mean, how long? How long is it going to be in Britain or France? I mean, I hate to even say it because then later it'll come true. And I mean, I have like 5,000 listeners and you will know I said it, but no one else will. So I mean, it's very, very unsatisfying to be right about shit like this. When you have like a weird psychic flash in your mind and you just have a terror and you have a fear of a thing happening, but then 3 weeks later it happens exactly like that. Is anyone else having this? I'm listening to Alex Jones. It seems like he's having that. So, guys, we have to just carry on here. So what do we do? We're going through the whole exposure of this reporting and these documentation and this information coming out. And it's crucial that it comes out. We've got to get this out. We've got to make this story the story. This is the thing. This is the thing itself. This is the corruption and the depraved coup d'etat of the globalists and the United Nationists and the Obama worshippers, right? As they try to gut and cut the throat of America on every level. In the classroom, so in 10, 20 years, they can expect to be a whole army of degenerate, perverted, confused, gender dysmorphic little psychos running around, right? Willing to throw themselves on the gears of American freedom and liberty and burn the system down for their Soros and Marxist and World Economic Forum masters overseas who serve London and Rome, right? Now, we got problems. We have to remember who we are. We gotta stop apologizing for the fact that the entire backbone of human civilization for thousands of years has depended on heterosexual relationships and couples to raise the strongest, smartest, most capable children that they possibly could before they died. And that's how you have Obama. That's how you have all these people walking around ready to cut off babies in the womb, right? I mean, what about the baby in the womb? I keep hearing about these women talk about their vaginas, wear vagina hats, talk about how it's nobody's choice, but it's their vagina, it's their body, and they can orgasm any kind of way they want. But then when it comes to the baby in the womb who's also a woman, right? The little baby in the womb who's a little girl who doesn't even get a chance to even breathe air or see daylight or even have a chance to decide if she wants to have a baby or not. What about her rights? What about the rights of the unborn? So you know that those are children. We can see the picture. Okay, it's not back in the day when we didn't have the ultrasound, the super high pixelization of the picture and you have the ultrasound technician sitting there with you and showing you, oh look, it's your baby. Your baby's asleep. Your baby's sucking the little baby thumb. Oh look, your little baby is blinking its little baby eyes. And when you kill that human, you're a murderer. You know what? You know what we should do from now on? If you need to have an abortion and you hit the abortion button, we're just gonna fix you. All right, we're just gonna bring you in and clip you. You don't even need to have any more babies that are going to get murdered in the womb, okay? You can go out there and hump everything you want. You can hump all day. You can get inseminated by all them, like the one woman who goes on there, she's on Twitter talking about, I've had 24 abortions. Like, you don't know how that works yet, you fucking murdering, sick sow? You disgusting fucking sow. You don't know how that works? You don't know those are human being lives right there? I mean, what about that woman? She can't rewind the tape back in her own mind and think about, well, when I was a baby in my mommy's belly, and I wouldn't want to get snipped, right? I'm enjoying having all these fucking orgasms and she has the joy of sex and the joy of life, but she doesn't want to share it, right? Not to any woman baby or man baby, no babies. It's my body and I'll use it as a vessel to commit murder all day, right? No, these women are not women anymore. Like we were saying in the other episodes, these women have given up their right to be women, right? They're not mothers. They don't have any children. They're just riding around trying to see who they can hump their fucking genitals on. They're just men, right? They're just men. They don't want to have anything from it. They just want their womb to open up and give a burst of air. Poof. No baby, right? Their vagina is just a fuck hole to fuck. right? They've made their bodies into a mechanism to please man's dicks. Not any one man in particular, but just all the men in general. They're just a fuckhole that serves dick needs, right? The fuckhole doesn't produce anything. It doesn't actually have a baby out of there or start a family, or the fuckhole doesn't stay faithful to one man. Oh, no. This fuckhole just serves the pumping, orgasmic fuck action, the humping needs, right, of men. That's all it does. That's what these women do. They're just fuckholes. And in the process of a bunch of babies get murdered in there, nobody wants to smell the smell of the rotting, fetid sewer of the death chamber canal, the vaginal death canal there, right? It gets smelly. All the dead babies that were in there, but the men who are using the women that way, and the women who are murdering the babies that way, they're all going to the same place. They're all just vanity. They're just like a little fog in the morning, and then the sun comes up and it just disappears. That's what these people. They're just going to disappear in time. They're completely useless rodents, like the mosquitoes, right? They're the existential equivalent of a human mosquito, where they're just completely useless, right? They just go around narcissistically flailing around their body parts. Right, they don't actually going to use their body parts for their intended purpose, right? Their breasts are not going to actually wean and nurse any children, right? No, of course not. These women are just there to, use their bodies pornographically to allure men, all for the purpose of some useless, meaningless fornication in order to become a mechanism for baby murder, right? Useless, bastardized baby murder. And then they want to actually look at themselves in the mirror and pretend like they're real people. They're going to go hold up a sign outside that says, "Ban white men." Yeah. Because they know what's going on in life. They know what the big game is. They know what they stand for. They have meaning, right? They have real substance. So this is the other side, right? This is the other side who we're having to fight against, and it's sad that we have to fight against them, but it's like when the immune system comes into play and destroys a sick and dangerous looking little pathogen that's coming in to ruin the biological environment there, and that the immune system is going to kick in and just destroy that and get rid of it. That's what we need to do. Our emotional and moral obligations, our sense of duty to our nation and to our parents and to our children, because we actually have children. If you're listening to this, you have children, right? Or you could hold a child and not look at like it's some kind of disease, right? Because a child is the future. A child are the future individuals who are going to be manning the planet when we are dead and gone. And so all these individuals who refuse at a young age foolishly to have any children will regret it later, because it'll be a deep, agonizing, searing pain within your soul later when you realize you passed the point. Like right now, you can still do it. Even guys out there who maybe got the snip, you could unsnip. You can still be productive. You can still have a baby. You can have this little sliver of your own soul, a little shard of your own soul, and hold it close to you and share everything you've ever learned with it, and share all your love, and leave someone behind when you leave this earth, a little piece of yourself to carry on, to still be you. It's the eternity of your soul. It's the expression of the immortality of the human soul to have children. And when you don't do it, you're killing your own future line and your own future bloodline. Are you ill? What is wrong with you? Have a chance. Take a chance. Do what you have to do. Have children. Have some children, guys. Stop being such cowards. Stop believing all the mantra that just leads you to this end place where you're just an old, lonely person who's ready for the hospice. Because no one, never had a marriage, never took a vow, never had a one that you swear to hold for your whole life, right? Never had a child, doesn't know what it's like to have people that you care about more than yourself, right? Just an empty, useless, really, truly useless eater. That's what you and the left are becoming, you progressives. And look at your children carefully. Make sure that they can grow up to be natural, healthy individuals. Because if you fill their head with all that Marxist bullshit, you're going to raise such deranged and emotionally damaged individuals that they'll never have a healthy relationship. Right? That's what really screws people up, is leftism and progressive politics and the denial of everything natural and beautiful about the humanity and the human race. And we are a human race. We're not some kind of sub-races. Right? I'm just sick of hearing about all the different races. There's not different races. We're one human race. How ignorant do you have to be? Right? This whole idea, we look a little different. We're from different people. We have different ancestries and tribes. Okay, and different tribes and ancestors of the same human family, the same human race. There isn't a diversity of races. That's stupid. And it goes back to this theosophy, right? You're going to go back to the United Nations Theosophical Society and their magic and all their sorcery, right? Where they believed utterly that there was all these ancient root races 50,000 years ago, right? If you go read Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, one of the founding lights and the occult sorcerers and the magicians who was really behind all the strange witchcraft at the foundation of the United Nations. And the whole process of having the Theosophical Society, of course, if you look in the background, there's high-level Freemasons all in the background there, helping things along, helping the foundational key aspects of the development of the Theosophical Society. And of course, they would be shown to be charlatans and weird, like, carnival barkers in the end. But during the time, they had everyone's imagination, and they held everyone's belief that they could somehow reach the Akashic record, right? They could dial into the White Brotherhood and to the higher level order of masters, the sacred masters, right? The white masters up on the high mountains far away. So we're going into the superstitions and the imagination and the level of ignorance and the darkness and the abyss of a lack of knowledge of the American people and the world, the people of Europe and England too, right? And of course, this is where it's really being fixated. So the ascended masters, right? That's what Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, that's who they would pray to. And that's who they would spend all their time trying to convince everyone that they were getting special letters and special messages from. And over the course of time, they convinced everyone in this whole new biblical structure of antiquity, right? This new Bible knowledge, where there would be these ancient races. It reminds me of Mormonism, right? When they had Jesus go and arrive in America long ago, when there was these battling races of Indians who would murder each other, and there was the good Indians and they had light skin, and there was the bad Indians and they had black skin, right? It's just bizarre. Like, you go into these people, you go back in the 1860s and 1870s, these people were totally fucking weird. They were totally out of their minds, and they were totally sick with this putrefying occult witchcraft and sorcery that's just no knowledge, right? There are no root races. That's all bullshit, right? And you can see, if you move up through the course of time, that the biblical structure of antiquity, the biblical accounts of the Tanakh, right, and the Torah and the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Chronicles and the Book of Kings, right? All those literary structures and literary places and dates and names and historical points are all totally validated. You can't validate anything that these Mormons said. There's no, like, golden book, all right? Golden book of ancient Egyptian language that the American Indians were speaking, right? That's all bullshit, right? We have to start to admit that this is bullshit. These people in there, I don't know if they have to admit it or not. They don't have to ever come to a final admission that their whole religio-cultic system of esoteric knowledge is Gnosticism and it's totally, completely fictitious, right? Let's just admit it. You're into fiction, guys. Same thing with you Pope worshippers over there in the Roman Church. This is America. Let the Roman Church be in Rome and the American Church be in America. And let the never two shall ever meet. Okay? So if you're a Pope worshiper, you're in this group. You're in this group of esoteric witchcraft sorcerers. I know you don't think that. I think you're turning the body and blood of the bread into Jesus, and I'm going to eat it, right? You weird cannibals. You transubstantiationalists, right? You believe in something that's totally ignorant and totally idiotic and totally profane. And you're carrying it on because your ancestors taught it to you, and then I guess you have to try to teach it to your kids, and of course your kids are going to become marks. They'll laugh in your face. They're going to join Hamas, and they're going to set off a bomb because you are empty. Your religion is empty and it has no power, it has no meaning, it has no oracle of truth, it has no light, right? Go back in all the canon laws of all the Jesuit provinces and go through it all, right? It's all just about total, absolute drive to power. That's it. That's what the Holy Alliance and the Congress of Vienna was about. They were pissed. They had fucked up. The abuses of the Inquisition went way too far for centuries, and they murdered millions of people. They started murdering and burning people at the stake in South America who didn't even know what Europe was. Never heard of Rome. Let's burn them at the stake, right? All over Mexico, Inquisitional fires burned people alive. The abuses of the Inquisition are beyond what you can possibly imagine because you're not read. What do you read? The Wall Street Journal? You're just a bunch of ignorant fools. You don't know what's coming. You don't understand that the horrors and the atrocities of World War II under Stalin and Hitler, seeming adversaries. So you have all these seeming adversaries everywhere working together. And so you have Hitler and Stalin bringing back the Inquisition, bringing back the ideals and the abuses and the absolute arbitrary torments and tortures of the Roman and Spanish and other various European inquisitions, they brought it back to real life, and they brought it back in an industrial scale with IG Farben, right? They didn't bomb IG Farben plants over there. Oh no, they avoided that. It's all part of their inner system of power. All right, so guys, we're going on and on here, but we are going to point out here that the abuses of the Biden and Obama presidencies has become so great, and they're trying to keep all the motives under wraps, right? Keep all the shredding all the documents. They're deleting and bleach bidding all the emails, right? But we can see what they're doing. All right, we're smart. There are hundreds of millions of Americans in this country, and we are depending on this ship of state, this nation, this huge inflatable life raft that we have in the ocean here of history. We are depending on this for our very survival. We cannot have these Marxist traitors destroying our nation with no answer, with just cowardice, with just people, oh, I don't want to be fired, driving out our military, driving our military operators out of the military, creating dissension within the ranks. Right? These people are absolutely out of control, and they have got to be held accountable. The entire cabal, the entire phalanx of traitors, they're going to destroy us, guys, or we're going to have to find a way to work out on how to rout them out of government and hold them accountable and put them in chains, put them under charges. It's time for the justice to come. I used to kind of like wince when Donald Trump would talk about executing drug dealers. Well, I'm with it now. You know what? I don't care about that anymore. That's the least of our worries. Let's start up the executions. Let's start to hang people for if you commit treason against this nation, we'll hang you. How about that? If you go and try to speak to a child and pervert them about sexual topics that are none of your business in a 5th grade classroom, how about we hang you? How about if you rape a child in Florida, how about we hang you? How about that? How about we just you know what I'm saying? What can go wrong? Maybe a couple people will get hung who shouldn't. I don't care. Because the word needs to go out far and wide. Don't touch a kid. And we need to do something about these schools. Are they protected? I think about what happened to these communities in Israel when they were just suddenly attacked by thousands of men with guns go into these communities and just suddenly within hours murder and rape and brutalize and kill thousands of people. Can that happen in America? I mean, our yellow buses? I mean, how many different weird Hollywood movies are we going to, see the Joker show us how easily the yellow buses could cart away kids and have kids murdered? We did protect our schools, guys. I have a bad feeling. About that. I have a feeling that we're going to need to have armed guards positioned around our children at all times. That's what I feel about it. So there you go, guys. I don't want to belabor this and just have to go around in circles here, but you can see at this point, we're basically full contact at this point. I mean, this conflict here in America, if we're not able to preserve a republic, if we're not able to stop the steal in 2024, you can look at Laura Loomer. She already has video showing how these Eritreans and people from all over the world are coming in here to do everything they can to try to vote in our elections. And I think that's just part and parcel of the whole plan here that we're witnessing. And if we're not able, to stop people, if Arizonans are not able to, fire their weapons and shoot to protect their own homestead and their own front door and their own hearth, right? Then we have major problems in this country that are not being worked out by supposed law and order. And it doesn't, the justification for the consent of the people is gone. And so now that transforms the police and sheriffs into kind of marauding enforcers of tyranny, depending on where you're at. I guess it goes county by county. Some counties are going to be blessed to have righteous men who still know what the Constitution is, but these other places are going to be the enforcers of Nancy Pelosi, the enforcers of Gretchen Whitmer, the enforcers of Kathy Hochul up there, right? All these law enforcers at the tip of the spear and the point, the barrel of their gun, which they'll enforce these insane, unfolding globalist United Nations policies, the unfolding slow democide and the slow coup d'etat of American, the once great American nation is unfolding before our eyes. So I don't want to carry on too much more with that, but I just want to say ultimately that we have to stick together. We have to, nations that pray together, stay together. And I think we should do our best to support those in our community, because of this global catastrophe is going to cause us to need to think and act and to put down roots locally here more than ever. So we have a few more things we have to turn to, and right now we'll pitch over to the war room and hear their perspective, which is always necessary and insightful.
Just give me your, let's walk through, because we'll take some time here today. We're going to have some people tucking in and out, but just give us your theory. We got about 7 minutes in this block. Give me your theory of the case. You just take it and run with it. What is Mike Benz's theory of the case of what has happened to our beloved country?
Well, there's basically an immune system of permanent Washington, which is comprised of at the top, you have the foreign policy establishment, the national security state, the corporate and financial donors and drafters off of it, and the political opportunists on both sides of the political aisle. The way that I essentially see the framing of this issue is the managers of the American empire versus the citizens of the American homeland. We've had since we became an empire, you could argue, in 1898 when we won the Spanish-American War and took the Philippines and became this overseas empire with territory to protect. And you could argue even going back to 1823, with the Monroe Doctrine and our forays into Latin and South America, that American industry was always sort of an international enterprise. And you do need a full-throated, red-blooded, brass-knuckled foreign policy establishment to be able to protect U.S. national champions who have businesses abroad. The issue is even though that was effectively magical for America to develop its middle class during the 20th century, by the 1990s, globalism started to break down as our manufacturing miracle was reduced to a rust belt, as the Chamber of Commerce companies that benefited so much from globalism under the protection of the Pentagon, the State Department, the CIA, and other intelligence agencies, as there began to be a split between the welfare of our globalist institutions and the citizens of the nation that they were supposed to be trickling wealth down to and serving at the electoral level, there became essentially the growth of populist opposition, which is, populism is not a dirty word. Populism is the recourse to corrupt or to institutions that have gone astray. And the issue, as I see it, is not Republican versus Democrat or conservative versus liberal. Those are things that can turn with the tides. What we have right now is a foreign policy establishment which is imbued with a department of dirty tricks, things that we've allowed them for a century to do abroad to foreign governments and foreign citizens and foreign institutions. Apologies. Turning that inward. And so you have the foreign policy establishment against populism, both here and all across NATO, in the UK with the Brexit folks, and in Italy with the Matteo Salvini folks, and Spain with the Vox Party, and Greece and Germany with the AfD Party. This is, all across the board, there's been a rise of populist groups, also on the left, I should add, and in each case where they are threatened by the foreign policy establishment, the democracy has now been effectively completely destroyed, because you have an immune system such as a Justice Department that will be weaponized to arrest any populist leader who rises to power, or a lawfare system that will bankrupt them, police who won't protect their meetings. You have the silencing all across social media, gag orders placed as they're being put on trial so that they can't even defend themselves. Their lawyers being arrested. Steve, you being targeted. It's one of these things where there was always the relationship between the managers of the American empire and the citizens of the American homeland is broken down, and that has played itself out in the story of the censorship industry, which I really see as my mission for the story to tell.
Now, the censorship industry, you're saying, is actually an offshoot of, it's a combination of the administrative state, the actual functions of national security and intelligence and law enforcement in the American administrative state, and big tech outside, correct? It's a combination. It's a public-private partnership.
It's a great way to put it. Yes. Now the term that they use is whole of society. There's a whole of society counter misdis and malinformation network that they. Now this is their terminology, and what it means is it takes four separate classes of institutions: federal government agencies, private sector companies, civil society institutions, and media and fact-checking groups, and has them all working as a synchronized network to be able to censor emerging narratives or political groups who essentially pose a political challenge for the foreign policy establishment. And those private sector institutions, I can go on at that length, but I'll look like you were going to.
Yeah, no, hang on for 1 second, because I want to take it. We're going to take a break here and come back. I want to break it down. I want to talk about CPAC. TNUSA.com/Ben. Make sure you take action on this today. This IRS grind is only going to get much worse.
You created a bit of a firestorm in Washington this week when you sounded the alarm about the national security threat related to a Russian anti-satellite weapon. The New York Times is now reporting that the concern is whether Russia might put a real nuclear weapon in space. Based on the intelligence you have seen, how serious is the threat?
Well, the threat is very serious. Everyone who's looked at it uses the same language that I have, that it is a very serious threat. And I'm very glad that the administration is beginning to take action. We met with Jake Sullivan.
Okay. This guy is a total complete liar. Okay, he did this. This is all about his buddies in Ukraine. He had just been over there seeing Zelensky, rubbing up on Zelensky. This was all to try to scare this audience and say, oh gosh, maybe we should give the $60 billion to Ukraine. Ben, you see this all the time. This is a perfect example using a useful idiot like Turner to put out what the deep state wants to put out, because the deep state's got so many dark secrets in Ukraine that they got to keep the grift going. Or people, if they don't get the money, they're going to start spilling the beans, bro. So walk me through the Turner incident of last week as a classic example of what you've warned us about.
Yeah, well, this is really the GOP civil war between the populist and the globalist side of the GOP playing out in real time. This is why I was sort of teeing this up in the last segment on this is not Republican versus Democrat or conservative versus liberal. It's foreign policy establishment versus populism. You see, there's the U.S. The GOP for a century now has essentially drawn its political strength and its representation in Washington as being essentially sponsored by military, energy, and Chamber of Commerce backers. That is, the military industrial complex was primarily a Republican institution in the 20th century, with our essentially our production facilities in California and Texas, and you had the energy, the oil and gas companies, which were the largest companies in the world for the 20th century, and until big tech essentially matured in the 2010s. All of the major top 10 market size corporations were oil and gas companies, and you had the sort of Chamber of Commerce blue chips that primarily supported Republicans because Republicans were for low taxes, they were for free markets and free enterprise, and they exported those values abroad, which meant that there was a powerful Pentagon, State Department, and intelligence apparatus to be able to ensure territorial control over resources in countries who were exercising resource nationalism that might box out our big oil and gas companies or private companies selling goods and services to foreign markets. And that was something where there was some synchronicity between the globalist and the nationalist side of the GOP during the 20th century, again, until globalism really started to erode that synchronicity. And what you have now is the major party establishment in Congress for the GOP is still on the globalist side. But you have this growing faction, and by far the most popular faction at the base level, that is for populism. So again, you have this divide where you have Turner representing essentially the managers of the American homeland, and you have the populist side of the GOP representing the people who live here. Turner representing the empire, essentially, and the populists representing the homeland.
Yes. And
you have this divide where now there's so much money that goes to the managers of the empire, and none of it comes back home to us. We have, $20 trillion in debt, and our PISA scores are falling way behind even second world countries. El Salvador has a better murder rate than any of our major cities. it's we're falling apart, and the people and what remaining wealth that we have is being used to go straight into the coffers of peoples whose interests are all international, not actually for the people who live here. And so, the issue is Washington is controlled by the empire forces, not by the forces of the homeland. And, Trump's election in 2016 was really the first time that the foreign policy establishment had its back broken at the electoral level by a populist surge. I think they would have done this to Bernie Sanders too, because he also wanted to roll back before he, I would say, bent the knee.
Yeah. He bent. He's all. It's a pillow fight with him. He took on the Clinton apparatus. Clintons were the epitome of this. The empire managers, right? Both Democrat, the Bushes and the Clintons, those two apparatuses that have been involved in every election, I don't know, for 40 years, is that Bernie Sanders, if you're gonna go for the king, you got to go for a head wound, and he's just a pillow fight. He just yammers on, right? The Bernie Bros not going to do anything. You think Bernie Sanders is going to take on the deep state? You think Bernie Sanders is going to take on the administrative state? You need a beast. That's what Trump was. Trump went into beast mode. Okay, and as you know, Mike, you were there, and this is why they had what I call the nullification project started immediately. This whole nonsense with the Russian collusion. Now we know what 26 of us were not just targeted by Brennan, but Brennan then farmed it out to the Five Eyes, to his Five Eye buddies, to make sure that Trump's inner circle was completely monitored. Mike, just hang here for 1 second. I want to keep you around. This is quite profound. The interview with Tucker was landmark. If anybody's got the time, you definitely should watch it. It's incredible. We've got Mike Benz here, one of the officials from Trump's first term, and by God, got to be a senior guy in the second term. So we're going to take a short commercial break. We're make sure, look, when we talk about the post-war international rules-based order, it's not just the national security state, but it's underpinned, as Putin was so nice to point out, by the U.S. dollar.
So Mike Benz does pretty well for us there to make it clear that Washington, D.C. is an asset of the empire forces. So as we said before, these empire forces can be, esoteric and maybe hard to comprehend in all the covert action and the foggy and illusory world of the secret societies, papal knighthood orders, and clandestine agencies and intelligence communities, and all the instruments of data collection of the Five Eye nations. And so, when you begin to combine all that and look at the totality of this globalist world structure, we all find ourselves to be, Jason Bourne and the Bourne identity, right? And I don't know about you, but I'm not taking any kind of digital implant. I'm not going to take Microsoft's digital ID. I don't care if they mandate it. I don't care if they come with bayonets affixed, right? I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn about what these people expect to turn us into cattle, have us, all wearing little ear numbers, right? These young people are ready to wear ear tags shortly, All these new seeming fads that seem to obsess our young people's minds are absolutely astonishing. And it's all we can do to get them through this gauntlet, this Marxist dungeon for your identity and for your mind, right? Your whole soul. You have to go through this teenage, awkward years of being a teenager anyway. Now you have to go through this sickening societal ritual of trying to resist the forces of perversion, right? And all these young people can't do it. And then you have no one talks about the ocean undercurrent of depravity and pornography. I don't know about you guys, but that should just be outlawed. I mean, it should just be totally illegal. And they should have to have a system of, retina ID. You want to do some face scans. You want to get a chip in your hand. You want to do some implants. You should have an implant if you're going to regularly be looking at some really horrifying pornography. I guess back in the day they had Playboy. I mean, that doesn't even count anymore. That's just more like modern art, right? I mean, what we're talking about is going beyond any kind of notion. These words, they are like a bottleneck in our intellectual ability to grasp and map out the world around us. Because the truth is, this stuff is going way beyond pornography. This is just some disgusting mental illness and sexual deviance being filmed and promoted around on the internet, so that people can, get entangled with it, get addicted to it, get absorbed into it, and replace all human sexual health and functionality with rubber blow-up dolls, right? And like, I guess you can get your favorite porn star. I guess you can get a mold of her vagina shape into some kind of like sexual toy that you can hump on your pillow or something, right? So what do you need? You don't even need men and women anymore. You can just objectively, you could have the, I guess you can just wear like a virtual reality Oculus goggles and hump your vagina mold in your pillow. And, no women, I mean, no babies will be being born, and I guess there'll be no more abortions. So I guess that's good, right? I mean, but the point is that technology in the last decade and a half has interfered with human development and psychosocial functionality to such an extent now that I think we're being atomized and dehumanized. And these young people are young people today. I mean, how are they supposed to know how to manage this? Such a change. And I guess we're approaching this point of this technological singularity. And suddenly we're kind of beginning in this Stone Age level comprehension of what the ramifications will ultimately be. And you can see things out of proportion to traffic, the strange, the strange influx of people flowing from place to place, escaping here, trying to get into America, trying to get out of California, trying to escape New York, right? Escape LA, escape New York, right? No shit. So as we're going forward here, guys, this is going long, but I have to go ahead and introduce, I'm just kind of smashing it in here, this really crucial piece here. This is a crucial piece, and Jan Jekielek is, he's a living legend, right? I mean, come on. This guy's like Walter Cronkite. But I mean, Walter Cronkite isn't even Walter Cronkite anymore, right? I mean, Jan Jekielek represents the new forces of honest press media, in Epic Times, right? I mean, I paid Epic Times just for the joy of having a newspaper that is like, it's like sincerely, legitimately, speaking the language of sanity, right? It's crazy. Or at least reporting on stories that have substance and have meaning, rather than just trying to brainwash me with propaganda messages, and instill me with fear of and terror about viruses. The media, the propaganda power of the Mockingbird corporate news media messaging system, right, is really at the core of our fight in these info wars. These info wars are about getting the fight to get real information that doesn't make you sick, that doesn't mislead you, that doesn't give you the wrong signal, right? And as we look at this report here by Jan Jekielek, we'll wrap up the program, but it's crucial that we recognize now how serious this fight is, how important it is for us to overlook so many other kind of really very minor differences that we have as Americans, super minor. And we're per capita as a people, the smartest people, per populace as a nation, our great strength and our great strategy and our great wealth is how smart we are. And we have to give way to all kinds of different views, all kinds of different ideas, as long as people are trying to, with integrity first, do their best to actually arrive at the truth and arrive at a place where they're trying to understand and represent and journal the truth to such an extent that it's an accurate reflection of history that humanity and people in the future will be able to ultimately resort to in order to understand themselves better and understand where they're at in the world. And so if we have histories and journals and writings and political and public displays of political sloganeering and the bantering around of concepts and philosophical ideologies that are not honest, they're not sincere, and only there to derange and bring the populace down and to cause harm and to cause problems and to get people fighting, right? That destroys the future hope of civilization as well. So it's time for us to put our big boy pants on and our big girl pants and to go out and do what's right. Even though we don't always agree about everything, we're going to defend each other's rights in America, and we're going to go back to the way things were. We're not going to participate in this process and this entering into this crucible of annihilation and dialectical warfare that is so extreme that reduces us all to these particles in an atom, like blacks and whites, like neutrons and protons, right? Everything is a color revolution. Everything is a color, red versus blue, right? Everything is a Super Bowl kickoff conflict where one team crashes their helmets into the other team at all times, right? So it's this constant synthesizing and destroying of American history. And we have to refound America. We have to refound our documents. We have to refound a lot of the statues they took down, and maybe reapproach them historically in a better way too, to represent the history more accurately, in order to make sure that people can't say that those statues are racist statues or Confederate statues or whatever, and to memorialize the past and to give way to the heritage of people who fought bravely in conflicts and wars that we didn't necessarily agree with their ideas, and had to fight them, had to fight each other, had to fight ourselves. That's not something to kick dirt on. And we can't let these leftist idiots who were born yesterday tell us what history is, all right? So we're going to return here to American thought leaders. And this guy, this particular gentleman here, and you'll hear the discussion, I'll have the link in there, is so instrumental, it's so crucial, it's so essential to understand that we're getting to this place where we're going to have to take flack. Whistleblowers are going to get arrested. People are going to come out and start telling the truth. And we have to be prepared to hear it and understand it. And we're responsible, we're accountable. We can't just put our heads in a hole, try to serve money masters, or try to serve our bank accounts. Because pretty soon you realize that your bank account, especially when they start to tokenize money and digitalize it, the money's going to get real weird, and the purchasing power is going to dissipate to such an extent that when you spent your whole life to get yourself to a big pile of money, and suddenly it doesn't buy what it used to, you're going to realize that you've been cheated slowly, and you've been robbed slowly by inflation. And they did this to us by having the ability to use the money first and get the value out of it, and then kick it down to us. And it's hard for people to comprehend how inflation is robbing them over time, and how ineffective it is just to sit there at a job and pay your payroll taxes and collect a stub, or get your salary check or whatever, and pay your ridiculous amount of taxes to the government, taking a quarter of your income over your lifetime just to rob the rest of the savings you're able to keep with inflationary headwinds that are totally catastrophic. It's treason, right? It's treason on all levels. It's such a large-scale treason that people can't even put their finger on it. They can't even name it. So here, let's carry on with this fascinating discussion that absolutely sheds light in the darkest places. So now I'm just going to hit you with the whole thing. There's really nowhere to cut the article. There's nowhere to really cut in and dial it down and end it. You have to kind of hear the whole piece. With that, we also have to remind you to go check our wonderful sponsor, wendyslimited.com. wendyslimited.com is the boutique supremacy online, the hottest new styles and boutique couture for all the women in your life. So we just have to ask you again to go and support us, support Looking Glass Forum, support all of our different programs here. Come join the book club, come log in and get in a membership with us, send some emails and hook up with us so you can come and join and become part of our inner community. Skeleton Key 318, and that's the private community of our book club there. And naturally, go ahead and make sure you go to wendyslimited.com and try out her awesome express boutique shopping service with a smile, where she has everything you need there with her limited catalog selection. 2024 is out. Go check it out. And once more, as we said, thank you for coming back to Looking Glass Forum. And here is Yanye Kellick with the great American thought leaders.
The Tucker Carlson Vladimir Putin interview. Okay, so what do you make of Tucker Carlson going to Moscow to interview Vladimir Putin?
I think any journalist should go meet any foreign leader and get whatever information or disinformation he can out of him, as long as he knows it's all an orchestrated setup on the other side.
My thoughts almost exactly. So that's interesting.
Putin's going to say what he will have said, and one can guarantee that he put his best propaganda people in charge of prepping him for a very long time.
So what do you make of, suggestions that Tucker Carlson shouldn't be allowed back into the country, or I haven't verified this, but having been put on a kill list by the Ukrainians, or what do you make of these types of things?
That's That's a great way for the Ukrainians to win support from people who are on the fence, is to threaten to kill Tucker Carlson. Really. What kind of lunacy is out there where they want to use either censorship or violence to prevent a journalist or commentator from interviewing a world leader?
Any journalist probably should want to interview any world leader, with the appropriate caveats that you mentioned earlier. It would seem a normal thing.
Of course it would. I mean, who wouldn't want to interview Xi Jinping? Any international journalist would want to interview the guy, knowing that it's all set up.
So before we dive into Big Intel, tell me a little bit about your background so we know what you're coming in with here.
Well, my background is kind of eclectic. I came in with a very favorable view toward the FBI and the CIA and our whole intelligence community as the fundamental instruments of our protection during the Cold War. The FBI mainly as counterintelligence against Soviet spies and agents of influence. CIA is the main instrument of containment of communism, or what we had hoped would have been. Waging covert warfare at the sub-military level so that we wouldn't have to send our own troops in. Informing our presidents, with the finest possible intelligence gathered in the best manner, with the most solid, vetting and everything. That's what I was expecting. What I saw was something very different, coming in as a college undergrad. And so that's how I got into all of this. And I've sort of been looking in, still with a lot of contacts inside the system, but very alarmed that where any human institution is going to have its problems, always, its challenges always. There was a breaking point in the FBI and the CIA where they stopped serving American interests.
I mean, that's an astonishing statement, or maybe would have been astonishing some years back. Right now, there are many people, including myself, that are wondering how much that statement is true, because obviously it can't be entirely true, right?
Right. It's a generalization. Mm-hmm. But if you were to say, is it a yes or no issue, looking at it in a black or white way, it ceases to serve the American interest if they view themselves as states within a state. If they cease believing in the real American founding principles, and they're there as the central government to protect all of us rather than servants of all of us. So it's flipped on its head. Of course they fight foreign spies. Of course they're great at fighting human child trafficking within the country. They're great at fighting organized crime. The FBI has done a lot. They've protected us from international terrorism attacks. The CIA has been the world's best at this. There's no question. But there gets to be that breaking point where what are they protecting if they're full of people who don't believe in America anymore, the way it was founded, and the principles on which it's based, and they view half the country as potential enemies?
So, you entered, let's call it the system, out of college, but tell me a little just about your career.
It was never in the government. Mm-hmm. It was around the government. So starting out as an undergrad, I was approached when I was a student journalist, ended up being a part of CIA Director William Casey's privately funded network to support President Reagan's policies against the Soviet bloc, to roll back Soviet communism. Didn't really know what I was getting into at the time, and I should have been quicker to figure out if you're told to go to church and sit in the back, and then the CIA director walks up to you and tells you a name, has somebody repeat the name, and he keeps going after one of his friends had given you walking around money to go on a trip with a CIA-backed insurgency against a communist regime. It took me a long time as a 21-year-old to put all that together, but in fact it was actually Bill Casey giving me my cryptonym at St. Matthew's Cathedral, and 30 years later I found he did that so that he would never have to testify before Congress what went on in church.
Can you just flesh out a little more about what you actually did?
Yeah, well, first I started out wanting to be in the CIA to wage the fight, Reagan's fight against communism, and was told by a few people, my professor Jack Ziak and Angelo Codavilla, who's really well known, who I knew as a Senate Intelligence Committee staffer, and he said, "Don't go in. You will hate it, and it will hate you. It's not for the mission-oriented anymore."
Wow. And what year was this?
1983. So that's when I went in with Casey's privately funded network, which it turns out he was funding it out of his pocket. Again, again, so he wouldn't have to tell Congress anything because it was his own money. It was his own business. We were just kids. We didn't know what we were up to. And we just went. And my job ended up being to collect intelligence in Central America on Soviet bloc support for the communist government in Nicaragua and for communist guerrilla movements elsewhere in the region.
And at some point, you stopped doing this. I guess, was it at the end of his tenure? Or
it was before then.
Okay.
Yeah, I got married at the time and then went off and did other things, but I met a Salvadoran girl during the war. We had a family, but I kept going back and forth, and I still worked with the Contras in my own private capacity because I believed in their cause, and was working with the Salvadoran army in my own private capacity as well, and then went into journalism.
I keep hearing this narrative repeated. This is kind of a narrative, let's say, on the conservative side, that mainstream media is actually just a mouthpiece for U.S. intelligence. You've heard this?
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that?
Some journalists are, for some elements in U.S. intelligence. What we have is a symbiosis between the intelligence community and mainstream media and some investigative journalists who are chiefly on the left. And it's been this way since the 50s. You build up the careers of certain journalists at the Washington Post, or the big three networks that they used to have, or then CNN and certain websites now. You leak to them illegal leaks. It's illegal leaks of classified information. They become dependent on you, the intelligence officer or analyst or agent, as the source. So they're not going to cross you. They're not going to say anything bad about your entity. They're going to protect you as a source, and then you're going to build them up in their careers. They're going to write books. The better ones are going to make a lot of money off these books. They might get some movies out of it. And so you're creating now a wealthy cast of journalists who are wholly dependent on the intelligence community as their sources of livelihood.
And do you have a sense of how prevalent that approach is?
Anybody can tell. If you read intelligence sources say, or so-and-so has received, documents from the CIA, or unnamed intelligence officials say this, that means, unnamed officials are leaking to that journalist or to that news organization. So there's a favored relationship in there. Now, any good journalist is going to work sources in there, but not any good journalist is going to get a constant stream of leaks over a lifetime of journalism.
You mentioned that these relationships started in the 50s. I mean, you hear about Operation Mockingbird, for example, and so forth. But the thesis of your book is, they went from war heroes to deep state villains, right? Or Cold War heroes to deep state villains. And so that started as early as in the 50s. Is that what you're saying? Or explain that to me.
Well, that's when the CIA was founded in the early 50s.
Right.
And that's when the Cold War began. Now, on the one hand, it's important for journalists to know certain things. But it's also important for intelligence officers to obey the law and not leak classified information to journalists and not pick favorites among journalists. So this is where, in the 50s, you had Allen Dulles, who was head of the CIA, and his brother, John Foster Dulles, who was Secretary of State, and they were very close to President Eisenhower. So there were times like with Khrushchev's secret speech, where Nikita Khrushchev gave that speech to the Soviet Party Congress to supposedly expose Stalin's crimes and to hold themselves all blameless for the crimes they also committed. But it was admitting that it wasn't just Stalin who was the bad guy, it was the whole communist leadership and international communist movement. And so that's why it was a secret speech, because if the whole communist movement knew about it, just the different parties of loyal Soviet agents and supporters around the world, if they knew, they'd be terribly demoralized. So when the U.S. got their hands on this speech, that had to come out. That was a great intelligence coup to get that speech. So how do you publish it? Do you have the CIA leak it? No. In this case, you had the Secretary of State release it as a State Department release, translated into various languages by the AFL-CIO, by a private entity that was allied with the U.S. in waging the Cold War, for distribution to ethnic communities who didn't speak English, or to distribute abroad. So that's a good way of using intelligence in a non-manipulative fashion, not playing favorites with journalists and just getting information out there. So they knew how to do it right. But they also knew how to do Operation Mockingbird type activity, which was to run things through news organizations
With a specific agenda.
Yeah. And when it becomes a political agenda, it gets even worse, because then it's intervening in how Americans think about their own leaders, how they think about their own policies, and then you have unaccountable intelligence officials manipulating American public opinion and therefore American politics and elections through management of attitudes.
You could briefly remind us, for the benefit of the viewers, what is Operation Mockingbird, if someone may not have heard of it, and some people suggest this is something that's still very much ongoing.
So, well, we don't know what's ongoing, first of all, do we? So we don't know what kind of operations are continuing or what new ones there might be. So we know what's been declassified or leaked. So Mockingbird was an operation to work through the press to influence public opinion. You capture journalists that way. It was very straightforward, but it was not just individual CIA officials leaking to certain journalists. It was an actual controlled operation that was run from the top and coordinated.
And was that with the intent to seed specific narratives into society? Or?
Yeah, it was really to wage the Cold War against the Soviets. Mm-hmm. But the way the CIA did it was they didn't support real anti-communist movements. They didn't build up anti-communist forces. They built up non-communist forces. They built up the democratic left, or even the almost democratic left, or undemocratic left that wasn't totalitarian, to keep them away from the Soviet-controlled communist parties and organizations, and to bring them into the wider spectrum of politics in whatever countries they were in. So you had the real anti-communists in Europe. Who were they? We don't know. It was all sort of moderate Christian Democrats, and then anti-communist labor, not because they were right-wingers, but because they viewed the communists as rivals in their faction to control the labor movement. So you had this building up of the international left while the Soviets were building up the international hard left at the same time, and that dramatically affected world politics and the way the world is today, and globalism for that matter, because they were both global movements.
You actually make a very interesting point, because, let's take the Solidarity movement in Poland, which is perhaps one of the ones that I'm the most familiar with, right? There was a group of the Solidarity movement which was called Fighting Solidarity, Solidarność Walcząca. And they were the only group, actually, which had the explicit mandate to be anti-communist, to basically seek the removal of communist governance or something like this. Whereas a lot of people today don't understand, actually, that Solidarity was a labor union fighting for workers' rights. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. How many people know about Fighting Solidarity?
You don't hear about it much. I'd forgotten about it.
Right. That's fascinating. Why? So explain to me, and of course this is you develop this quite a bit in Big Intel, but explain to me why were they not supporting anti-communist forces but only so-called non-communist? That's a fascinating distinction to me.
During World War II, we didn't have an intelligence service when the war was about to begin for us. It had already begun elsewhere in the world. But it didn't affect us really, but we had no foreign intelligence service. So the British came to the U.S. and said, hey, you guys really need a foreign intelligence service. Let us help you set one up. Seemed like a pretty good deal. President Roosevelt appointed William Donovan, Wild Bill Donovan, to set up what became the Office of Strategic Services. And that was our wartime intelligence service that collected and analyzed intelligence for the president and then ran covert operations behind enemy lines. So this is where young guys like Bill Casey were recruited. He invented the hedge fund, the tax shelters to help people get around Roosevelt's New Deal wealth confiscation. So you need guys like that who just know how to disrupt systems with minimal effort to be brought in. A lot of them were good anti-communists in general, as well as anti-Nazi. But when you think about during the war, Bill Donovan's real goal with the OSS was, and the way he saw it, defeat the Axis enemy. He didn't see anything beyond that. Meanwhile, J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI, Donovan couldn't stand him, and it was mutual, said, it's not just that. Stalin wants to reshape the world after the Nazis are defeated. We have to be cognizant of the fact that he's going to be manipulating us. And lo and behold, of course, Stalin was flooding the United States with his agents and assets and so forth, many of whom went into the OSS. So you need native speakers of these different languages behind Nazi lines and in areas we need to operate. Who are you going to get? Well, it was a lot of them were Communist Party members from those countries who had fled to the United States. Mm-hmm. Some for refuge, some to implant themselves as agents. So this is where the Frankfurt School developed in the United States. We can touch that later on.
Yeah.
For the purposes of our diplomacy and our covert operations, if you have left-wingers from Europe and communists from Europe coming in to the United States in the 30s, joining our intelligence services as subject matter experts and operatives, they're thinking of where they came from, and they're thinking, we want to shape that when it's done. So you have the Stalinists want to shape it on Stalinist lines, but then you have the Euro-socialists want to have a socialist Europe emerge from this. This is not putting American interests first. This is defeating Hitler for whatever they want. So you have this left-wing pro-communist and left-wing anti-communist sections in our intelligence services, and then when the OSS was abolished, Manning went into the State Department, and they shaped the policies that we're living with today.
That's fascinating. Well, so you actually, I think you used this term right from Diana West, the unbroken thread, right?
The red thread.
The red thread. That's right. I interviewed her about that book years ago now. She found some astonishing, disclosures around people who identified as communists very early on and so forth. You're basically saying this, the seeds of this were there right from the beginning, right?
Before our beginning. So yeah, it's one thing to say, well, these people on the left or these Soviet agents did something in the 30s and therefore things are the way they are today. That's not cause and effect to say that. So in writing Big Intel, I was looking really at what happened under Obama. How did the center just collapse within the FBI and the CIA? And they both got overtaken by wokeness. Who was responsible? When did it happen? Why did it happen? What are the original documents to prove that it happened this way? And then going and look back, well, where did that impetus come from? And where did it come from before that? So by going backwards, you find the Diana West's red thread, this intellectual chain of custody, going back without a break from person to person, all the way back to a 1922 meeting in Moscow, over 100 years ago, at the Marx Engels Institute, with the leaders of the Comintern. It was the Communist International. So this was a brand new international, global entity that was set up by the Bolsheviks to control all the radical socialist and communist parties around the world, make them loyal to the Bolshevik Revolution, and then to replicate Bolshevism worldwide. But it was all a centrally structured command and control system for this. So they're meeting at the Marx Engels Institute with their European, mainly, agents, and the founder of the Cheka, or what became the KGB, Felix Dzerzhinsky, to discuss how can we have a Bolshevik-type revolution worldwide. And the consensus was, well, we're not going to have workers rise up in a violent workers' struggle like Marx had called for, or even a violent revolution as had happened in Russia, because the workers are being paid too well. They're aspiring, or at least they have some kind of hope. We have to find a different way to do it. So a Hungarian Bolshevik named György Lukács, who had been a minister of culture in the Hungarian Bolshevik regime that had taken power just before the Soviets took power. It didn't last long. But he was the strategist behind the Red Terror of his country, to round people up and murder them based on their political and cultural views, to break up families, to break up churches, to break up any sense of moral tradition, to sexualize children and separate them from their parents, break up nuclear families. This was a strategy of his.
Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar.
Right.
He lived until 1971, and he was very active as a theorist and a revered figure on the left for all those decades. He was part of that red thread, but it was one of his ideas. He was the first to implement it. Karl Marx came up with it in 1843, 5 years before he ever wrote the Communist Manifesto. So he wasn't this economic madman who didn't know anything about economics, but became famous for the Manifesto and then Das Kapital. But 5 years earlier, he was a cultural warrior. Mm-hmm. He was writing about destroying pride in one's country, obeying legitimate laws, church, family, heritage, history, parents. All of these things were oppressive. Your country's oppressive. Your just rulers are oppressive. Your morals are oppressive. Your religion is oppressive. Your parents are oppressive. Your siblings are oppressive. Everybody is oppressing you. And that was what he wanted to do, to just rip society apart. That didn't catch on. So he got onto the Industrial Revolution troubles and the terrible treatment of workers back at that time, to try to then have economic conflicts become the engine of change. So this was revived after the Bolshevik Revolution at this 1922 meeting, to set up a school in Germany where you could have all the intellectuals and trendy, beautiful people and trust fund babies looking to be cool and relevant, and add a lot of Freudian sex stuff and drugs and any kind of intoxication, and just be cool and have a good time being revolutionaries, to rip society apart. At a time when Germany itself was ripping itself apart after its unconditional surrender after World War I, not knowing what direction it's going to go, and it didn't have a long history of unity as a unitary state anyway. So you had all these factions battling each other. So the cultural Marxists, backed by the Soviets, thought, let's just fight the Hitlerites last. We'll fight everyone else first, tear out the center of the country, and then we'll take over. Well, Hitler moved faster than they did. They fled. Many of them came to the United States with the help of a Soviet intelligence agent who negotiated with Columbia University for them to set up their Frankfurt school shop at Columbia University, which had a teaching school to teach the teachers who's fanned out across America, and to work with a certain John Dewey, who was head of the National Education Association, who went to the Soviet Union and wrote a 6-part series in the New Republic praising Stalin's education system and designing a new education system to change how American children learn and how they view the world.
I'm thinking about Yuri Bezmenov right now, because Yuri Bezmenov, there's a few videos of him lecturing that have been preserved, talking about how a core, let's say the majority, I believe he says the majority of the effort that the Soviet, I guess it's the KGB or state security exerts is to basically subvert America versus gather intelligence or something like that.
Bezmenov gets a whole chapter in Big Intel. So I went through those interviews and his lectures, transcribed a lot of them so that they'd be now in print and not have YouTube suddenly make them all vanish someday. And he was such a wise figure of his time. These were interviews that took place 40 years ago.
And just very briefly, if you can just tell us who he was.
He wasn't a KGB man. He was a Soviet propagandist under a journalistic cover based in India. But he knew the whole English-speaking world very well. So he defected to the United States, relocated in Canada, and then surfaced with this immense knowledge of how Soviet propagandists are trained and the whole philosophy and doctrine behind that training, and the hows and the whys of that training, to break down our societies piece by piece, to create confusion, to create demoralization, to cause us to lose faith in ourselves and everyone around us and everything that we ever believed was good, and just to ruin us inside, to collapse us from within, and to basically defeat us the way Sun Tzu wrote, right? You defeat the enemy without fighting him. And this is what Bezmenov was explaining in 1983 and 84.
I don't think a lot of people, understood it or were ready to grasp that this was something that was happening, or I don't know how was it received at the time?
It was received by people who were ideologically anti-communist and allied with President Reagan. No one else wanted to hear the message.
I would argue that our biggest threat at subversion, and I think I could argue extensively about this, it currently comes from the Chinese Communist Party, which I know this is something you know a lot about because we've talked about it in the past, both online and offline. But it's not something that appears a lot in Big Intel. I'm curious about that.
That's a whole separate book or separate lifetime of work to explore that. But I didn't focus on them in Big Intel because I was trying to answer, how did the FBI and CIA become woke?
Mm-hmm.
Then I traced to Obama, and then Obama's political lineage and the people all around Obama. The CIA director under Obama had voted for a Soviet agent to become president of the United States and knew that he was a Soviet agent. This is Gus Hall, running on the Communist Party USA ticket. Right. And then 3 years later, he gets hired by the CIA. That's kind of a problem. Why? And it's not like he had an epiphany at some point to fight these guys. It's he just sort of dismissed it and just went along. And even in his memoir, where he admitted this, he never drew any lessons from it. He just said it was a lark as a young man.
He didn't hide his ideological predilections as at the time that he was being hired into the agency, right?
Right.
If I recall correctly. So this was, I mean, that's what I found shocking. Right.
Well, what you do when you're interviewing for a job with a security clearance, especially in intelligence, it's like confession, right? You admit all your dirt because they're going to find it out on you anyway. And if you're lying or obfuscating, then you're definitely out. So you admit it, and then they assess, well, does this present a danger to the United States?
Well, right, exactly.
Yeah. So, hello, but he had just voted a few years earlier for the Soviets, and now he wants to be a CIA officer. It's not like he's a defector from the Communist Party saying, I want to help the U.S. destroy this. It's, okay, I voted for Leonid Brezhnev's man to run America. He makes his career there. And then Obama makes him his Homeland Security advisor at the White House and then names him to run the CIA. At the same time, another radical, General Clapper, who, just because these guys wear uniforms and have stars and talk about my lifetime of brave service or whatever they say. No, he was a known extremist throughout his career. His stories about him at the Defense Intelligence Agency back in the 90s, and I was close to people at the DIA at the time, and I heard them firsthand then and collected more since. He was protecting the worst elements in the DIA. He even protected the group of female Latin America analysts at the time who were outwardly pro-Che Guevara. One had a Che Guevara poster in her cubicle, not as a trophy, but as a sort of a shrine. But one of the people he was protecting was Ana Belén Montes, the Cuban spy. Now, I'm not alleging he knew that she was a spy, but I am alleging that he was protecting openly radical extremists who were intelligence analysts there. He gave Pentagon passes to the Russian GRU military intelligence resident, the chief of Russian Soviet and Russian military intelligence here in Washington, a Pentagon pass to go around unescorted. Who on earth would do this? He had the authority to do that. Mm. So these are the people who make their way up the system, and somehow they all coalesce under Barack Obama at the top of the intelligence community. And then they reach down into the system to bring up those who came in from below and put them in middle management and upper management, but couldn't do it on their merits a lot. So that's where diversity, equity, and inclusion comes in to pull them up for other criteria. Mm. And lo and behold, you have now woke people running the entire nerve center of the CIA.
Well, so this is very interesting because one thing that, from lots of discussions with people who have been studying this or, trying to expose it, is how DI actually works. Right? Essentially, there's a kind of a coded language, if you will. If you speak the language and you put it into your applications, everybody who is involved knows exactly what it means and knows what team you're on. And that's, I guess, whether you're a true believer or someone who's just kind of figured out the code, right, and how to game the system. Because I assume it's
there's a lot of that.
Right. Like not to mention any, but for example, people who would identify themselves as being some sort of visible minority or part visible minority, when in fact they're not, because they knew that would get them with the right language, more opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
And as long as you're able to self-identify as what you're not, you can be advanced because your ideology is right. But I mean, look what this does to truth. If you say that you're a gender or a sex or a race or whatever that you're not, and people are forced to believe that you are, and they can't just agree that you are, they have to really believe that you are, because that's part of it. Is like Winston in 1984, right? 2 + 2 = 5. You can't just say it. That's not good enough. you have to believe it. So, like, the FBI had a training program in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I got the 56-page slide presentation for it. That's devoted a whole chapter to it on gender and the importance of gender, because now DEI is what FBI Director Wray calls a core principle also in the CIA, and the CIA has said this on their own literature that's unclassified. So these become the core issues, and if core operating principles, and even the FBI recently sent out on X a message that DEI ranks on par with the US Constitution as a core principle of the FBI. But here's the thing though, when you believe that a man is not a man or a woman is not a woman and it's whatever gender they say they are, and you must believe it, and your professional future depends on it, what does that do to honest assessment of evidence as a crime fighter or as an investigator? What does it do to intelligence collection and assessment and the evaluations that we do for the national leaders of the country within the community if facts are no longer facts?
Well, it's like everything is subjected to an ideological test, basically.
And who did that before? The Soviets did it. The Chinese Communist Party does it. So here we are in a post-fact intelligence community driven by social, political, cultural agendas that have their direct origins back in cultural Marxism, spawned at that 1922 meeting with Felix Dzerzhinsky in Moscow. The Republican Congresses have been funding this stuff, so it's not like it's a partisan issue. They go along with it because it must be important if the FBI is doing it or the CIA is doing it. But if you look at what they're doing, it's important to have whoever's the best person for the job. I don't care where they're from or what they do or what their personal life is like, as long as they're not threats to national security and they're the best people for the job. That's what you want. And you need to have the FBI trained in, okay, how do you work in certain cultural groups and subgroups, because you have to be trusted as an investigator. You have to make a coherent case before a jury. You need to work in those communities to understand. That's fine. But what they're doing is they're making our own FBI agents and CIA officers what they call agents of change, to change our culture. This is not legal. This is not what the intelligence community is for, but that's what they're doing.
What portion of these services do you think is, thinks that way, I guess, is the question.
It's tiny. So in the FBI, it's about 1.6% are what the FBI now defines as LGBTQAI+. They keep changing it, so I might have switched again. 1.6%, according to the FBI's own figures. So the FBI isn't as diverse as it pretends to be. And not all that 1.6% wants to shove this down everybody's throat. Just a fraction of that wants to. So you have a militant, tiny group that's within the Bureau pushing this, and then they end up being in the nerve center and then being the political enforcers within the Bureau. So according to this 2021 FBI training course, if you misgender somebody a third time, that's a mark against you professionally, and that will affect your promotion.
Almost every system, right, in Western society, it seems to have this same structure that you're describing, right? A very small group of people that sort of says, yes, this is the right thing we're doing, and a very tiny, ultimately a very tiny group of people behind it, but wielding great energy and effectively power, and everyone else kind of going along with it with a few defectors and people who don't like it and do so openly.
So think of it from a cultural Marxism side. You've got the ideology of cultural Marxism, and the critical theory is the intellectual structure, the theoretical structure for how do we process things. So you don't need to know the ideology if you're trained to think a certain way. We can't say that. That's racist. You can't say that. You're a misogynist for saying, well, I'm not. No. And then you want to overcompensate for that so you won't be called that again. So the whole object of cultural Marxism is to cause us to lose confidence in all our institutions. So it's not just the FBI. It's not just the CIA. It's not just government. It's medicine. Think of it. You can't trust your doctor anymore. You can't trust the pharmaceutical industry anymore. Now, there are many reasons why we should be really skeptical and concerned, but when it gets to the point where there's a total lack of trust, what becomes of us?
Well, exactly. So let's use an example, okay? Because I'm thinking of one in particular. You've just mentioned these policies that, Director Christopher Wray, right, of the FBI has instituted and made a, kind of a top priority of the agency. And you've just explained why that is highly problematic. At the same time, you have Director Wray testifying in Congress about the Chinese Communist Party's, one, infiltration of American systems, two, cyber tools set up to not just gather intelligence, not perform military activities, but actually harm civilians. And this is the testimony, right, that he's giving. I believe that testimony is accurate based on our own information. However, you probably have, and apparently for good reason from what we're discussing, a whole bunch of Americans out there doubting that this is real because of other things the FBI has done that have proved to be, false, frankly, and contrived. So, this, what you're describing, it's a huge problem, but there's also this important role that's being played, right, by the agency. And I'm very glad that Director Wray was able to publicly testify to these things, because this is a type of reality that we need to be incredibly concerned about, right? So I'm trying to figure out how we kind of square this, because we kind of fall into the trap that the cultural Marxists want us to fall into. And we have reason to.
Yeah, now if we know the trap is there, we can avoid the trap.
Mm-hmm.
But if we deny the trap is there, or don't see the trap at all, then we're getting pretty close to the end. So it was great to hear FBI Director Wray make that public warning about communist China. And he specifically said, Chinese Communist Party. I don't remember him saying it that way before. If he did, I missed it, but usually it'd be the Chinese government or whatever. So it means the FBI is really onto something, and they're devoting resources to this problem. And we've seen it over the past few years anyway. But just think, if there are 9 senior diversity coordinators in the FBI, that's 9 senior people who are not working against the Chinese Communist Party. That's 9 senior people who are alienating most FBI personnel to comply with this crazy ideology, and 9 senior officials who are elevating people on DEI grounds who have no business being promoted in the first place.
That's right. It's now time for a word from our awesome sponsor, Wendy's Boutique Limited. Wendy'sLimited.com. And Wendy'sLimited.com is offering the hottest new designer trends and brand name couture fashion styles. So you have to hear about Wendy's Boutique. Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com now has designer women's apparel and fine jewelry, sexy boutique fashions, very best prices online. And you know that at Wendy'sLimited.com, they know what a woman is, what a woman really is, right? So if you're a beautiful woman, or if you know a beautiful woman, and if you don't, stop listening to this show, okay? Right now, just stop. But if you happen to know a beautiful woman, and you are a beautiful woman, you have to know about Wendy'sLimited.com. So these are the sexiest boutique fashions anywhere, very best prices online, beautiful luxury products, guaranteed authentic, guaranteed, no Chinese knockoffs ever. So this is the real deal. This is the real, the legit, best prices, hottest couture gear, fragrances. We had Tom Ford shades, great deal on the Tom Ford shades. Everybody loves Tom Ford shades. So you can expect to find Gucci apparel, Hermes shoes, Prada jewelry, all at Wendy'sLimited.com. And you got to remember, Wendy'sLimited.com is really now famous for canceling Balenciaga when it mattered, right? So we're not having any of that over here. This is a woman-owned enterprise, all-American, family-run organization. Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com. You got to come join the craze. Hottest new designer trends, guys. Wendy's Boutique Limited. We need your support. And she's been courageous to support the show. Wendy'sLimited.com.
So on the one hand, the FBI is our first line of internal defense against Chinese Communist Party espionage and subversion. But on the other hand, it is wasting its resources on its own cultural revolution internally, so that we can't trust them even when they're doing the right thing, or at least we wonder if we can trust them even when they're doing the right thing. This is just damaging.
Right. And then there's also the issue of focus, which I've talked about on numerous shows, right? If you're focusing on ideological tests for the local populace as opposed to identifying national security threats and neutralizing them, which you're also doing, but the focus, if there's so much of an emphasis on the first thing I mentioned, then the second, I would argue would be kind of the entirety of the mandate gets diluted.
Yeah. Think of the people who would make the best counterintelligence officers, let's say to work against the CCP. Is the rainbow flag trans agenda really a recruitment point to get that type of person to want to join and have supervisors who force them to go this route when their real mission in life is to go hunt down Chinese communist spies? Look at military recruitment. We can all see that. And look at the types of ads the military's been putting out to get sort of the most useless elements of 20-something society to join the military, and not the most useless elements of 20-something society to join the military, and not the real people who we want as real warriors to join the military, alienating them out. And then we have this terrible recruitment crisis. So then you take lowest common denominator, which is spelled DEI, and you focus your recruitment efforts on them to bring them up into the system for the sole purpose of making the FBI look more like America.
A number of people have pointed out that the people that are disproportionately go out and frankly die for this country are these white males, which are now kind of in the DEI system. They're the absolute bottom of the intersectional hierarchy.
Yeah. But even, anybody who's mission-oriented, doesn't matter what kind of demographic they're from, they're not finding a home in the military or the intelligence community because the invitations basically say they're not welcome.
One of the things that you catalog in your book is sort of thoughts about how to deal with this, because it almost seems intractable.
It gets really discouraging if you just look at the problem. And the problems are really severe. But if you have stage 3 cancer, that means you have hope. Maybe even if you have stage 4 cancer, there's still hope. So what can we do? First thing is, the FBI's, so let's say it's politicized beyond repair. Let's just say that as a point of argument. What is it doing to harass or abuse ordinary Americans for political reasons, let's say? The FBI's eyes and ears on the ground at the local level are the state and local police and the county sheriffs. And the county sheriffs have a unique legal authority to determine whether or not or how federal agents can operate in that county. Now, county sheriffs are elected law enforcement officers. So this is an election year. So every county sheriff is going to be up for re-election this year. And there are other candidates who seek to be sheriffs. So this is a way for every citizen, when they know this, to say, how can we help you as sheriff to make sure that the feds don't come in and abuse us? Or how can we hold accountable if you're not going to be doing your job that way? So you're letting the sheriffs who are already aware, or the candidates, that they have the people behind them. And then you're letting other candidates know that they had better do their job to defend the people who elected them.
Maybe you should explain a bit, like what is it that sheriffs can do?
Well, I look at more of the federal part, but I've got 2 colleagues at the Center for Security Policy, Kyle Scheidler and Chris Holton, who work this all the time at the state level. And they're working with sheriffs nationwide and with state legislatures nationwide. But the unique thing is, every single citizen has a say when they vote for sheriff this fall and during the campaigns for this. And we don't normally pay attention to who's running for sheriff. We just check whatever party affiliation we like and move on. But no, we get to talk to them. Say, we've got your back, or we don't like the job you're doing. What are you going to do it right?
Sure.
See, a lot of sheriff departments and local and state police are bought off when the federal government gives them all this stuff, like cool electronic gear and cool armored vehicles and cool automatic weapons and cool training. And it's really neat and really fun. But how does that protect the local population, right, from abusive central government? So this is something that has to be an election issue for sheriffs. And it's one of the solutions. That's the federal.
It might not be obvious to people that a sheriff can take a stand against the FBI.
You're not going to operate in my county if I think what you're doing is illegal. I'm the chief law enforcement officer in this county, and you're doing something here that's abusing the Constitution or arguably breaking the law. And even if you're not, and you can come in legally, I'm not going to help you. I don't have to.
I don't know if this is a commonly known reality, what you're just describing.
It was new to me until my colleagues brought it to my attention, but a lot of sheriffs know this already, and they're really glad when they know that other people are making others aware of it. A lot of sheriffs don't know. They don't realize it. And they're in awe of Washington, or they're afraid of Washington, or they want that cool surplus military type gear coming from them. Once you're bought in, you'll do, the FBI field officers, hey, we need to send agents in. Can you help us? Can you be our eyes and ears? And that's where the sheriff can say no.
Many of your solutions are sort of at the local, county, or state level activity.
That's what my colleagues are doing at the Center for Security Policy, and they've written, go to securefreedom.org and you can find their material. And they've been behind a lot of state legislative initiatives as well to help states grapple with this problem. So the states still, and the counties and cities and towns still have a lot of ability. It's just they don't realize it, and the voters don't realize it. So that's the first part of it. The second part of the equation is you have a president come in who recognizes the problem, but can come in with a real team that like and trust each other, but have a real plan. They have executive orders written before Inauguration Day, a calendar to roll out those executive orders. So executive orders are decrees from the president to implement a certain policy or stop a certain policy or instructing different agencies to do certain things. Every president does it. There's not a problem with that. The problem is when President Trump came in last time, he didn't undo Obama's executive orders. I think he's learned his lesson this time. But you need to have his own executive orders to repeal bad ones that are already there, which he can do unilaterally, and then put his agenda forward through executive orders. And by law, the federal agencies have to abide by that as soon as they are made effective, which would be the very day that they're signed. But where he did use executive orders in other areas of his presidency, he didn't try to implement them as laws even when both houses of Congress were on his side. So Biden then came in and simply repealed the executive orders, and there was no law behind it. And then he just came in on day one with his team in place, with his executive orders to fundamentally transform the government. Reagan did this very well when he took office in 1981. Bill Clinton did a really good job at it, like it or not. Obama did a superb job at it, and Biden did too, with Obama's team using Biden, I would argue, as a cutout.
What we've learned over the last several years is that the agencies don't necessarily follow what the president's requirements are.
They can wait it out 4 years. They can drag their feet. They can slow walk whatever they feel like. They can lie. They can do whatever they want to a president who doesn't know how to manage a bureaucracy, who doesn't have a team to manage it. But it's not simply enough to put in your own guy as CIA director for a year, transfer him to the State Department, and then let the CIA run itself. That's literally what happened. When President Trump came in, he put Mike Pompeo in as CIA director, great congressman. What did the CIA do? They ran him like an op. They flew him around the world to visit all the CIA stations, kept him out of Langley as much as they possibly could. And then they said, just trust Gina Haspel here, who had so much great experience working with the British. Let her run the agency for you. So he didn't have any deputies under him who he trusted. So he did, and she She worked on him really well, and then he recommended, when he was made Secretary of State, let's put Gina in there, career CIA person. Well, if the CIA is part of the problem in interfering in our elections, why on earth would you have the CIA run itself? I mean, there was so much going on in the Trump administration, and there was not a coherent team that was really working, and they didn't have this action plan because the president viewed America as you would run a business, and it doesn't work that way. So, boom, CIA just continued running itself. So all those woke ads that came out from the CIA during the first months of the Biden administration were actually produced under Gina Haspel, CIA director, when she was working under Trump. So she just kept it going on within the community. Same thing with the FBI. You just don't fire Comey and then his deputy McCabe and then Peter Strzok, the counterintelligence chief. Counterintelligence chief, chief spy hunter of the country, okay, taking Hillary Clinton's campaign propaganda, working with foreign intelligence officers and a Russian who they suspected all along was still working for the old KGB to do the Trump collusion narrative. It's not enough just to cut off those layers of the FBI and then put in somebody else, even if it was the best person on earth. You have to just really go down to the root of the rot. It's like a cancer patient. You have to cut out the parts that are beyond repair. You have to heal the parts that are reparable, and you might have to have some transplants here and there, or you'll lose the patient. I appreciate the frustration of people who say just defund it all and shut it down. But that's like saying just because our military has messed up leadership and terrible recruitment that we should just not have a military anymore. That doesn't make sense at all. So we need the functions that the CIA does. We need most of the functions that the FBI does. So let's preserve the functions, but change the structures, change the command and control, change the whole bureaucratic ethos, and break them up so that they cannot be used against constitutional government. So what I propose, and there are lots of different points of view, so this is just to kick off a national discussion of how we would do this. So there are ideas in progress all the time, but you take the crime fighting part of the FBI, the criminal branch, and you move it over to the U.S. Marshals Service, eliminating some of the non-useful functions, and therefore you're eliminating the positions, and therefore you're eliminating the federal employees. You get them off the federal payroll, get them out completely, because you can't fire them. So you move it to the U.S. Marshals, which for its entire history is the first federal law enforcement agency, created by George Washington, with a really good reputation and not as woke yet as everything else. Move it over to the Marshals Service. Move the FBI Academy over to the Marshals Service. Move the FBI National Security Division. That's probably one of the most politicized units. Break that into a separate counterintelligence service simply to hunt spies and agents of influence. And then the rest of the National Security Division, like counterterrorism, parcel that out to other offices in government that already do that role, and so on down the line. It's not a perfect solution, but then you have nothing left of the Bureau except the human resources side and the other parts that you don't need. And then those positions are simply abolished. Those federal employees are off the books. They no longer have security clearances. They can't be a problem anymore. And then with the CIA just divided into, first, it's really bloated. I mean, you don't need secret intelligence to spy on climate change. But that's what we're doing with our intelligence assets. We're literally spying on the climate. Like, why do you need that? That's a big waste. Why do you need secret intelligence for gender? It's crazy, all the waste that goes in there.
Explain to me how that works.
I can't. It's beyond logic. But they have gender is a fundamental role of CIA now. I don't understand it, but they say that that's a big part of their core mission. So let's accept that as a truth coming from the CIA. But there's a lot you don't need. Of the 30-odd thousand CIA personnel, if you only have 1,500 actual agents out there around the world in the clandestine service, we don't really know how big it is, but it's comparatively very small. Then what are the rest doing? I mean, a lot of them are doing support activities and intelligence collection and analysis, and you need that technology. You need all that. But you don't. It's very wasteful and very bloated. So abolish a lot of the functions that don't need to be done. You don't need the CIA doing open source intelligence because any journalist can do that. Any grad student can do that. So you keep the clandestine covert operations side lean and mean and effective, because there are a lot of great people in there doing a fantastic job. As a separate standalone service, like a clandestine service, it's separate. And then the analytical or the intelligence collection and analysis side, the information collecting and processing side, make that its own service, but weed it out to get a lot of the woke craziness out of there.
How are people reacting to your suggestions?
Well, on the sheriff's side, a lot of people just never thought of that before. And I never did till my colleagues told me about it. On the dismantle the FBI side, I found that the younger former agents and whistleblowers think it's a great idea. And they would even go farther than I would go on it. Some of the older guys, either still in or retired, say, no, you can't do it. It's too complicated. There's a whole technology side that you can't break that part up. But they're also attached to the FBI brand. Mm-hmm. It's like the FBI has become the Bud Light of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Now, if you like that brand, you can stick with it. But most people would not stick with that brand under those circumstances. Mm-hmm. So we don't need an FBI if it's run its course, but we need everything it does. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you organize it to do it that way?
Mm-hmm. And what about on the CIA side? I mean, similar reactions, or how?
They mostly hate the idea. They won't argue on the woke issue because it's so blatant and so public. And a lot of even liberal CIA guys who are still mission oriented, they say, yeah, this is insane. This is doing us a lot of damage. Well, fine, speak up and get rid of it. They wouldn't speak on the record for the book. I couldn't even make hints about some of the people I talked to. Mm-hmm. So if they're not going to come forward, then they're dooming their own former agency. It should go the way of the OSS. The OSS just became a liability. That was the mission accomplished. But do it in a more orderly way than the OSS, which was completely abolished, and then we had nothing. Mm-hmm. Split it in two along those two functional lines, and then pare back the useless functions that are within them.
You're describing, massive changes. It's kind of it's hard to imagine, right? How all of this would work. But maybe as we finish up, any final thoughts?
We need all these functions, but we don't need states within a state. We don't need an intelligence community that views itself as above the American people, whose leaders believe and act that they can mislead Congress and lie to Congress, including the very oversight committees whose responsibility is to govern how they operate. You can't have an FBI director come in and not answer a yes or no question when either answer would not be violating any necessary secrets. They just need to know the answers. But if it's like when Senator Cruz said, did the FBI have any assets or agents who were involved in the planning or execution of criminal acts of violence on January 6th at the Capitol? And the senior FBI official would not answer. He was literally saying, did the FBI plan and commit crimes against Congress? And the FBI would not answer. And that was 2 years ago. And they still have not answered. You've got to ask, why is that? You would think the FBI would come forward and be as forthcoming as possible, but instead you have an FBI director who flies a Gulfstream jet from Reagan Airport in Alexandria, Virginia to Manassas, Virginia, a 6-minute flight for his commute home. This is his little principality, his little kingdom, and he acts like a sovereign entity. So that's a real danger. So now is really the time when it's our last great chance to do something about it, because the way the careerists have moved in and elevated, you're going to have the whole FBI full of bad people in the next presidential term, unless something is done this year.
Well, Michael Waller, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
It's great to be with you. I wish I could be more optimistic, but there is reason for us to be that way if our citizens are adequately informed and active.
Thank you all for joining Michael Waller and me on this episode of American Thought.
So here we are, guys. We're back with Wendy's Boutique, wendyslimited.com, wendyslimited.com, and the hottest boutique couture online, boutique supremacy online, Wendy's Boutique. So we've got to remind you guys, wendyslimited.com, our great sponsor. Please go and support her and support all the hardworking folks over there that are trying to bring you the best fashion design and designer brand name labels anywhere. So we just have to remind you that wendyslimited.com, wendyslimited.com is where you need to go.